已经部署了有4个单位，将近有数十名的警力来到高雄车站这边，目前都是全员戒备，然后远警都是来做长枪戒备。那么其实，在稍后呢，在早上9点钟的时候，高雄市长陈其迈也会来到现场进行关心。那么我们也要带大家来了解呢，其实，在今天的凌晨1点多左右，在高雄小港的某处公园外面是有被丢掷了2颗的烟雾弹。目前呢，辖区小港分局是已经在追缉当中。而我们目前掌握的是说呢，由于这一个烟雾弹，嫌犯放完烟雾弹之后是直接的离开了现场，也因此警方目前都还在调阅监视器追索当中。那么以上是我们目前人在高雄车站的最新情形。时间镜头，赵文鹏嘞。
就是因为在北车跟中山站发生的随机伤人案，在高雄这里也有警方强力的因应了。因为呢，看到了在台铁、高铁、捷运等单位的从业人员跟保全人员都有强化联防，也能看到警力全副武装，持长枪站出来执勤戒备。不过就在事发后，网络上竟然有疑似恐吓的状况，而且还直指地点将会在高雄车站。这个贴文是提到了张姓嫌犯是他的兄弟，还强调他们是同一个组织，没完成的任务会由他继续接下去。说下一个地点是高雄车站，甚至扬言12月25号会有更大的事件。虽然文章已经被下架，但是铁路警察局的警方也出面说明，目前正在由科侦人员及相关单位共同侦查中。
27岁的张姓通缉犯佩戴防毒面罩、防弹背心。
In today's video, we're going to check out the X14, the successor of the legendary X12 on the Mobila 8 analog. We'll compare the differences on the bench and what's good and what's bad. Well, mostly good. What? It's a Mobila 8! And what is up, awesome people? So in today's video, we're going to look at the X14, which is the successor of the legendary X12 flight controller. Now this X12 flight controller had been on the Mobila 7s, the Mobila 8s, and it's been around for a very long time. So today we're going to take a look at what sets it apart from its predecessor. Right out of the box, you have a packet of connecting cables, the XT30 connector, and the flight controller itself. Now, taking a closer look at the flight controller, you can obviously see a couple of different things that's not similar to that of the X12 flight controller. And a couple of major features of this flight controller is that 16MB memory for a black box, as well as the multiple UARTs that's available on this flight controller. One of the major things you'll notice is this connector that actually plugs into a USB-C, which of course is now more common in newer flight controllers these days. This flight controller also uses the new STM32G473 MCU chip, the same 12A continuous current for its ESCs, and an open VTX built in for up to 400mW and up to 2S LiPo input. Do check out the website happymodel.cn for the full pinouts and connection diagrams. Now the packet also provides you with an A30 LiPo connector, and this is for the 1S builds, but I have a spare 85mm frame and motors and props all ready, especially for this flight controller, so we're going to be building a Mobila 8. The motors of course are the standard EX1103 11,000 kV, especially for 2S. Do remember that if you're not getting the BNF, make sure the motors with the red dot is the one on the front right. Another thing that you want to take note is the fact that the camera for the X14 is totally different from the ones on the X12. As you can see, it is some smaller JST plug, and this connects to the standard JST of a normal analog camera. So I'll be using the Canex Ant, and that's because the plug actually goes straight into the camera itself, and that just saves me time from soldering. So I'm just going to plug that into the flight controller, and that's about it. For the canopy, I'll be using the Mobila 7 canopy. Now I've run out of Happy Model crown antennas, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using this RHCP Maple Wireless. So if you're wondering about the filters, PIDs and whatnot, just bear in mind that the flight controller actually comes pre-tuned from Happy Model. So I'm gonna be flying it in its factory settings. The only thing that I will change is the Express LRS, and what you're gonna do is just put the flight controller into Wi-Fi mode, and when the ELRS pops up comes up, just add your binding phrase and you are set. Now just a quick polish off the lens to make sure that everything is clean, and we're done. So the Analog Mobila 8 is ready with the new X14 flight controller, and it's now time to head to the field. Okay, so I'm gonna make this quick because dark clouds are right there, and the sun is up only for a little while. This is all set up and ready. This is basically your Mobila 8 Analog with the new X14, and I hope you guys enjoy the video.
Hello, Nomads Cult, and this video is about how to hollow out objects. Okay, so first, I don't have a 3D printer, so I don't use this technique for hollowing out, but I can explain it. So we need an example. So I add this head mesh and I delete the eyes. So we only need this one. And I'm smoothing the eyes a little bit. First, this mesh here is a closed mesh. So I think it's called a manifold mesh or a waterproof mesh. So I think you can print this out as a solid piece. Okay, so yeah, it looks solid, but in fact, in Nomads Cult, every mesh is hollow. So when we use here the trim tool and we trim the head and symmetry off, so we can look inside the head mesh, and you see here the head has a inside. This is the back face of your mesh, but there is no printable shell with a thickness. So we need to hollow it out for printing. So how to do this? I think in Nomads Cult there are two options. The first option is we need a second object that fits inside the other object, and then we subtract it from the main object. So in this case we need a second head and subtract it from the other head. This is the first option. So first I clear here the layers, and here in the hierarchy you can create a clone of your head, and you see here the red outline of the active object at the moment. And when you use the gizmo, you can scale it. So something like this. And here in the side view, you can check everything. And there are problem zones. So here you see with a gizmo, it's not possible to create a nice even shell here from the head. So you have to adjust it manually. So you have to use the move tool and use the symmetry on the left side and adjust here your mesh a little bit so that everything of the inner mesh, and you see here
犯下台北车站还有捷运中山站连环攻击案的嫌犯张文，如今他的脸书也曝光，可以看到他的大头贴照其实是穿着有点像厨师的衣服，摆了一个 pose， 但是也没有微笑，当做他的大头贴照片。而他脸书大约只有46位的朋友，而且呢，其实资讯也不多，照片呢其实也只有几张，其中一张呢就是他戴着鸭舌帽，好像是跟朋友去沙滩玩，所以看起来穿着十分的休闲。不过要带你来关心了，这个张文的背景，其实呢，他过去曾经在空军担任士兵，并且是服役在无线电的通讯中队。不过呢，却在111年的时候，因为酒驾而遭到了军方汰除。只是呢，也根据了解了，这些年张贤似乎都没有回家，所以呢，家人都只能透过金流来确认他的动向。也传出说呢，张文他的父亲管教相当的严格，所以呢，他从小好像就没有办法接受，而且跟家人的感情似乎也没有到非常的好。不过呢，他从小就对枪械还有相关的军事设备都很有兴趣，也被警方研判这可能是张贤利用烟雾弹行凶的原因之一。根据了解了，他的父亲是一个工程师，母亲是工厂的会计。家境其实还算是不错，不过因为他从小就很叛逆，所以跟家人的关系也都没有很好。目前警方也在持续的厘清，并且带回去搜索他家中的所有的物品，希望可以来厘清整起案件犯案的动机。台北市发生恐怖攻击事件，造成重大伤亡。事情发生后呢，知名漫画家梁少先在脸书发文指出，嫌犯投掷烟雾弹的地点竟然是跟他过去创作的漫画《燃烧的西太平洋》第1集中的爆炸场景位置几乎是一模一样。他表示，看到新闻后比对画面，发现漫画中设定的位置是从北车 M7 出口望向 M8 出口的地面区域，而爆炸点的位置是在 M3 出口与 M8 出口的轴。
房间跑进3只老鼠怎么办？
一如既往的 bonus 环节，
晚安曲，谢谢大家。好，我们来唱一下大家给我们的问题啊。来吧。中原普渡算是缴保护费吗？
哦，因为中原普渡的时候会少一点纸钱，对不对？
少给来阳间的好兄弟们，拜托们他们不要打扰我们。
哦，是这个意思吗？哦，
应该是吧。
这个灯光慢慢变得有点暗，是因为我忘了烧纸钱吗？
不好意思，再给我们10分钟，等一下我们就交保护费。
你想要交多少钱给他？你觉得他才不会生你的气啊？
以我的财力而言，可能可以有2-3公斤吧。
公斤
之前的办法，可能是称重出来的。
我觉得诚意不够，你还是用肉体偿还吧。
我要在烧纸钱的时候，在旁边跳着舞，说请看吧，为你们献上一只虎。然后旁边的人就觉得我才是好兄弟吧。那个怪叔叔怎么会来到这里？他不是鬼，也不是人，是妖怪吧？
为什么你唱歌突然有点像陈升啊？
不至于吧？
下一张，
下一张，脏话为何可以驱鬼？
哈？哦，这个脏话，
脏话，不是凶话，
我说
不是去九法就没有鬼了，好吗？
我今天很多鬼的题目啊，
第7月了吗？
但脏话要怎么骂才能够驱鬼啊？有些鬼喜欢人家骂他脏话，怎么办呢？
说多来一点吧。
他
他说不定是一个恩鬼啊。
说干你娘，你说多干一点呐、有这种我不要现在讲这种话，没有，因为他们很文雅，所以骂脏话他们会害怕。
你今天晚上还要住在饭店里面啊？
你也一样。
你今天如果遇到的话，会骂哪一句话？
我不会骂他，我会说去看看那间房。
啊，厉害啊！
我知道你的房号哦。
好色哦。
我们行政表单上面都有写啊，是你不想看吗？
下一张最后一张了吧？
哇，好适合你哦，太容易流汗怎么办？汗黄。
说真的，我很感谢我的妈妈把我生成这样，因为这样我的代谢就很好啊。不用担心，流汗就流出来吧，就跟流眼泪一样，多流一点啊，就多喝一点水吧。为什么有些人不流汗，他的代谢就有点差？他就得了肾结石啊！
你说的是我吗？那不一定啊。我不流汗，但流口水啊。只是我的结石没到嘴巴旁边就被我吞回去了。
你的结石是从嘴巴排出来的吗？我记得不是吧？你的肾结石来自哪里？从哪里出去啊？
从我的鸡出来了，有一堆沙。
眼前出现一片沙滩啊！
我的脑洞里面出现的山路冲击山呐，
冲击山，地理科教室哦，好可怕！
有片海滩在我的马桶里呀。
我建议大家多喝一点水吧。
多流点汗，像康康一样，这样就不会像我的结石啦。
这突然好阳光哦！最后一张，
房间跑进3只老鼠怎么办？
先跟第一只说，你等一下。再跟第二只说，你们两个是一起的吗？
那第3只它
再跟第三只说，你知道怎么回家吗？他点点头，走进陈彦达的房间来。
那你房间还是有2只老鼠啊？我是不很介意啊。你有2只老鼠加1只鬼啊。你的房间现在很热闹，你床都还没睡呀，已经都是脚印啦。你确定你还要回家吗？
我会邀请所有人，2只老鼠和鬼兄弟呀，一起去你房间晃一晃。
我的房间今天晚上要开 party 啦，大家纸钱烧起来，我们狂欢吧。
哦，让好兄弟看到你说，哎呦喂啊！
谢谢大家的收看，如果喜欢我们的影片的话，
现在有在笑吗？你们现在有在笑吗？那只要躲在荧幕后面笑啊！来现场笑嘛！
不要呛他们，
来现场笑啊！
好，如果喜欢我们的影片的话，欢迎订阅、分享、按赞、开启小铃铛。
对，
好，之后来现场，
来没有
跟我们一起笑哦。
对，来现场就直接来，
好啊。
来现场笑啊！
中年男人。 果然像你说的，就是非常潇洒，即便开始掉头发也不在乎啦。走在路上，抓起一撮头发，撒给路人说帅吧。
还好看。好的，我们即将要带来我们的
午安曲，谢谢大家。什么样的一首歌呢？来吧。
爱你。
偷玩我儿子的玩具。今天我们要带来什么呢？今天我们来带来一个蛮简单的一个海鲜炒面。这道炒面是大概10几年前我跟一位现炒店的师傅学的，他有稍微的跟我讲解大概怎么样的调料，怎么样的去运作。等一会我就直接示范给大家看。但是示范不好的话，你就不要怪我，因为这道菜我已经将近快10年没煮了，好吧？那我们就开始咯。那我们来开始介绍炒面的食材啊。今天会用到蛤蜊几颗就可以了。再来就是海鲜，我们先准备3层肉，这个3层肉一定要先煮过，稍微煮软一点，大概煮个10分钟也好，煮个15分钟都可以。如果你没有煮的话，等下炒的时候它一定会咬不动。再就花枝一点点就好了。再就虾仁，带壳的也可以，不要带壳也没有关系。再来就鱿鱼，这个是发泡过的鱿鱼啊，处理过的鱿鱼。再过来我们就要准备辛香料，青葱，最近青葱特别贵，我们放1根就好了。洋葱少许啊，姜片1片，蒜头1颗就好了。蒜头就是一点点有蒜味就好了，不用到很多。再过来就是高丽菜，最近下完雨之后，这个高丽菜特别贵，1颗要价150块，你就放一点点就好了啦。高丽菜一点点。再过来就是准备黄面，黄面有2种，第一种就是煮半熟的，稍微比较粗一点，我们回来之后加水煮过才能够去炒。第二种就是凉面，凉面就是老板已经帮你处理好了，都已经帮你煮熟了，所以这个面会稍微有点软，所以你就不可以再过水了，因为它非常软，所以像这种面就是可以直接炒的。像我们今天就准备凉面，大家准备一点点吧。我们先来煮蛤蜊，蛤蜊加点水啦，直接把它煮熟就好了。做这个动作有一个好处，就是我们在炒面的时候直接放蛤蜊的话，如果有沙的话，你就会很麻烦，整锅炒面就毁了。但是我的习惯就是先把它给煮熟，如果有沙的话，我们可以挑起来，这样子炒面的时候才不会吃到沙子。煮完之后把它倒起来，放在旁边。再过来，咱们就来煎面。把面煎一煎，煎出来的面的口感会不一样哦，大家可以试一下。我们加一些油下去，面就直接丢下去咯。像这种煎起来的这种面啊，吃起来它有个特殊的口感，你们可以回去自己试试看，它的口感很特别，它的口感很像半熟的泡面。差不多了，我们翻个面一下，要煎到这样子。恰，继续煎。好了，两面都已经煎到差不多有点金黄了。有时间的话，可以自己再继续煎下去了。我们就把它摆在上面就好了。开始炒了，开火，放一些油下去，姜跟蒜、洋葱全部下去了。我们把它稍微炒一下。这块3层肉也下去炒一下，海鲜全下喽，虾子、花枝、鱿鱼全部都下去喽。这块蛤蜊汤也下去。放点水下去，这时候我们来开始调味了。酱油一点点就好咯，酱油膏也一点点， 蚝油也来一点点，再过来用白胡椒粉也撒一点点就好了，再过来就沙茶酱，沙茶酱也来一点点就好了，沙茶酱也来一点点就好了，砂糖也来一点点，高丽菜也把它下去喽。因为今天没有买红萝卜了，如果再放点红萝卜的话，放点辣椒，我这个看起来颜色就很漂亮了。我们来试一下味道，哦，非常的好。如果要吃咸一点的话，啊，你就再加盐就好了。外面的话是会加点盐，再加点味精，那个味道真的是棒极了。最后蛤蜊也下去了。最后我们来用太白粉，太白粉水，这个就是太白粉水，稍微的勾芡一下。撒点香油下去，面来了，就把它淋上去吧。今天水比较多啊，今天水下的比较多，我们把水拿一点起来。正常的水是这样子啊，因为等一下面搅一搅，这个面就会吸水进去了。这样就完成了海鲜炒面。海鲜炒面已经煮完了，这个面要搅一搅。今天水放比较多啊，你们自己在淋上去的时候再注意一下，因为等下这个面就会吸水了。它水它等下全部就会吸干干的。好了，就那么简单的海鲜炒面，记得把它搅一搅哦。其实这个面是很 Q 的哦。来，我们来开始试吃一下啦。这盘菜我实在太久没有煮了，水都没有把它抓得很清楚，但是还是可以啦。这个煎过的面啊，它会吸水，它整个面里面全部都是海鲜的酱汁，你们可以回去试试看。三层肉来2片，三层肉，虾子，我们来试试一下。
3, 2, 1, go. Alright, what's up guys? So some of you had problems with the pumpkin and the pumpkin being hollow inside. It seems like it might have to the top. Select mask, rectangle, and that we want to put. Now, this box remesh is cut. It's here, so then it cuts. So now you can see it's cut. It's actually hot. I want to do a boolean, and we'll just shrink it a little bit, and you'll be able to see. So now you can see how thick the wall is going to be, because the pumpkin inside we just made that smaller. So now you can see
Hello, Nomad Sculpt, and this video is about, I call it the hollow topic. Something like this. Here there's and now it's the. So let's look at this pumpkin. So to create point, or you with split for your mouth, you get business here, tool, such a mesh, and for this I use now the mask here, the mask tool, and split. Sorry, I have to set the symmetry to local. So here you can use for example the split option here in the mask. Split this and delete the splitted mesh, or you can use here split mask, split this and delete the mask, split this and delete the splitted mesh, or you can use here the trim option with no hole filling, so you can create here the split for your mouth. Like this. And here you see we made a mistake. We trimmed through the whole mesh. So use only front vertex only and trim this. So now you have the front vertex, so use only front vertex only, or use only
我卖掉的房子，然后开计程车，然后家庭不谅解，每天吵架。
被诈骗后的日子真的不好过，被害人遇上假投资，被诈骗千万。经过3年多冗长的法律流程，获得胜诉，但卡在被告账户的77万元现金，先前遭到冻结，判决出炉后仍讨不回来。
银行告知必须要取得法院或者是警察机关的一个公文，才能解除警示账户，必须要由被告亲自本人或他的合理的法定代理人去申请，才可以解除。法院告知我说，这个是你们被害人的风险点，你们本来就会有中间这个时间差的这个风险。
被害人说，诈骗集团开庭时坦承钱都是他的，由于账户被警示，没人可动，求助各个单位都没有获得解答，却在冻结期满解除时发现账户归零。他怀疑诈团透过不断的上诉来拖延时间，不排除时间一到就把钱领走。
和解了以后，结果他可能换到减刑了，或者他一颗罚金，或者是改服劳役，那个罪行极低啊。结果事后该履行给我和解的那个承诺完全没有，害我又从头要再跑强制执行。
3年多来，全台地检院跑透透，累积大量的文件，过程中也花费了大笔的费用。无奈公家机关从不主动联系，被诈骗后生活巨变，好不容易以为司法还给他公道，如今似乎成了一场空。
我痛恨这些诈骗集团，但是我更恨我们的台湾司法制度对他们的判刑为什么那么轻？
过往银行遇到类似的情况，必须要启动返还机制，通知账户人和被害人，必须要账户人同意才能进行。而在去年底修法后，改成不需要同意，但被害人的案件却是在修法之前，现在账户里的钱已经归零，想要用假扣押，恐怕也拿不回来。据新闻江曼台报道。
想看最完整的新闻内容，记得下载 TVBS 新闻网 APP。诈骗案件后，不是警察把嫌犯抓起来没事了，被害人将面临漫长的司法过程，要多久谁都无法确定。他们将处于外在跟内在的双重压力之下。外在部分呢，假设说开庭的时间跟上班时间搭不上，他们就得请假的出庭，损失的薪水要算谁的呢？包含像是如果是请律师的费用，以及如果这个法院跟他住家的县市不一样。这样子来回的车资也是一笔不小的费用。至于内在的部分，他们可能失去了对人的信任之外，可能还会遭受到亲朋好友的指责。更重要的是，他们背负的巨大压力，就是这些钱真的能讨得回来吗？
干嘛把它捂起来？
很头痛啊！其实家人现在也整天都在问我说啊，钱什么时候拿得回来啊？我们家450万能不能拿回来100万也好啊？其实也不知道该怎么办，那觉得很自责这样。那我又不敢跟其他人说，因为我会觉得会被人家笑，你是不是又傻又笨，就会觉得一直很忧郁。
不管是被骗多少钱，心情都是一样的，无奈这些痛苦只能往肚子里吞，要怎么走出来又是一回事。因为每次类似案件一曝光，被害人们都会遭受到不公平的检讨声浪，但我们都不是当事人，不了解他们当时。
Over the past decade, China has gone from a Silicon Valley copycat to a top contender in technology on the world stage.
Its ascent is peaking at a time when geopolitical tensions with the US and Europe are intensifying, and the rise of artificial intelligence has sparked a new arms race.
The US is rushing to curb China's influence in AI while balancing the need to regulate the powerful technology within its own borders.
How America manages these competing priorities will have implications for where the balance of power in tech will shift to next.
On this episode of AI IRL, we'll explore how China's playbook went from imitation to innovation and discuss what's at stake in the competition between these two superpowers.
Mustafa Suleiman, thanks so much for coming in. Now, you are the co-founder and CEO of Inflection AI and a venture partner at Greylock. Some people will know you as one of the co-founders of DeepMind, now owned by Google. Tell us, what made you want to start fresh with Inflection?
Well, now is really the moment. I mean, it was very clear to me during 2020, 2021 at Google when I was working on Lambda, the conversational AI that now powers Bard, that these large language models were truly going to be the future. And I wanted to start a company to build personal AIs, an intelligence that is completely aligned to your interests on your team and really functions as a personal assistant or a chief of staff, one that knows you intimately and over time can actually help you with practical tasks like scheduling, prioritizing, planning, and those kinds of things.
And that's what you're working with Pi.
Exactly, yeah. Pi stands for personal intelligence, and we see it as your personal assistant, essentially.
How do you feel about the concentration of power in technology right now among the big companies coming out with their own AI models? Microsoft, Google, Meta.
Well, I mean, I think you're right to point out that the big companies have the resources and the people and the compute infrastructure to be able to adapt and compete faster than ever, right? And that is a very impressive, reality of how technology works these days. It requires a huge amount of compute. And at my own company, Inflection, we've managed to raise a lot of money and build one of the largest supercomputers in the world. But on the flip side, the other trend that's taking place is that the open source movement is now almost at cutting edge. It's probably about 12 months behind the very largest models built at the big tech companies. And so that's kind of a contradictory trend. Like the big companies are getting bigger and better faster, but also everybody is now going to be able to get access to these same capabilities in open source.
Let's fast forward a little bit into the present day where the world order has changed since you first entered the tech industry. How did China go from being a copycat culture to a contender when it comes to digital innovation and specifically AI?
Yeah, I mean, China is more than a contender. I think in many respects, it's one of the leading players now. I mean, they've always been incredibly creative. And I think that we may have, sort of overstated the extent to which they were simply copying, what we were doing. And I think it's important to remain humble about the fact that, these ideas are going to be widely available to millions and millions of people. And, in many respects, all of our cultures are, equally creative, and they've been able to take, tools and ideas that are available both in open source and the academic literature and move them forward, innovate at the cutting edge. They've produced a lot of very good papers, contributions to the academic conferences that have been peer reviewed. So I just think overall it's better to take an approach of humility, acknowledging that they're also going to be a really significant player in this field over the next few decades.
How would you rank the United States in terms of technological prowess in that world order?
Well, I mean, there's no question that we, in the US and in the West more generally, are currently in the lead. I mean, we have the very best, most innovative technology companies and technology hubs. Without doubt, Silicon Valley is leading the pack. And I think we'll continue to. I think we worry too much that we're going to sort of be dislodged from our podium position.
For how long do you think?
Well, I think the question is, what does it look like to be dislodged? And is that really the right framing in the first place? Like, what is the difference between first and third? And, people talk about there being a race for AI, and it's very unclear what that looks like to come second or third in that race. I think it's sort of the wrong metaphor.
Are we talking about superpowers, Clash of the Titans sort of stuff? It reminds me of back when the previous US administration banned companies from doing a lot of business with Huawei, and Huawei ended up basically having to get a lot better very quickly at making its own chip designs and all that kind of stuff, and it feels like it backfired a little bit.
Yeah, you've also advocated for the US restricting sales of some NVIDIA chips, which are crucial in training AI systems, to buyers who don't agree or who refuse to use them ethically and safely. So what do you think is the best way the US can actually flex its power? Is it through the technological innovation or by stifling effectively some of its adversaries through regulation?
The first thing I should say about that is I don't think now is the time to do that. I mean, I think in theory, when the time comes, if the time comes for us to adopt a kind of global anti-proliferation strategy, we're worried about technologies being so powerful that we have to stop their spread. If that moment arises, and I think we're quite a long way from experiencing that, then technically that would be an appropriate containment strategy. Because much as this technology is manifested in software, it lives on the internet, it still sits on chips, you know, whether you're training a model or serving a model. So in order to ask a model a query, you have to have access to one of those NVIDIA GPUs. And, you know, for what it's worth, there are really only like one major company in the world that produces those high-end GPUs, NVIDIA, and they manufacture the vast majority of their chips at TSMC in Taiwan that use one single company, ASML, a Dutch company that manufactures the core chip that produces the chips, and they sit in the Netherlands. So it's actually a very narrow supply chain. And so I think the point I was sort of trying to make is that if you wanted to adopt a containment strategy, there is a supply chain where you can impose chokeholds on it.
In 10 years from now, which country do you think will be leading the world in AI? Is it going to be the US? Will it be China? Will it be Europe?
It's going to be the US, I'm pretty sure of that. I mean, the fundamentals in the US innovation ecosystem are unquestionably the best in the world. I mean,
what could flip that balance of power?
Well, I mean, I think it's hard to say. I mean, I really do think that the US is in the strongest possible position. At the end of the day, you know, it's talent that drives, you know, this innovation. And talent still concentrates around a small number of physical places. Despite everything that we've experienced in the pandemic and people wanting to work remotely, you know, it's still really important to be physically proximate to other people who, you know, are working with you in the office. I mean, you know, I think that trend isn't going to change. I do think China is going to catch up. I think they're going to develop their own AI chips, their own fabrication facilities. But that is going to take 5 years or so. The export controls that the US has implemented, you know, are real, and they really will prevent China from getting access to the next frontier of models, so the GPT-5 onwards. Right now, I don't really see how China could train those kinds of models.
Is there any downside, any unintended consequences that could come from this containment strategy the US is employing?
Yes, I think it is a very aggressive strategy. The counterattacks have already started, right? The China restricted gallium, which is a raw material used in chip manufacturing. And I expect them to have their own reactions in time. You know, we're very dependent on their supply chain. And so the idea that we could completely decouple, I think, is misguided.
I'm going to just put you on the spot really briefly and wonder, like, can you tell, because we're all friends here.
Sure, go for it.
Like, do you have a major regret about your work in AI? And do you also have a major single goal?
Yeah, my major single goal is to show that it is possible to create safe and ethical artificial intelligences which are accountable to humans. There is a possible trajectory where, you know, some groups may recklessly experiment with algorithms that can self-improve. And if in 10 to 15 or 20 years' time, those kinds of AIs are set loose on the open web in, you know, a reckless way, then I can imagine that possibly causing serious harm. And so for as long as I can remember, almost 15 years that I've been involved in AI, I've been trying to raise awareness and concern about the possible ways in which it can go wrong. And part of doing that is to show a bunch of practical ways that it can go right, both with writing my book and laying out a series of containment strategies and things that we have to do in politics to improve our governance and regulation, but also in actually building and making Pi, which I think is hopefully, going to continue to remain a very safe and controllable personal AI that can work for you.
Mustafa, thanks so much for coming in. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks very much for having me. It's been great.
Helen Toner, thank you so much for joining us. You're a director at Georgetown Center for Security and Emerging Technology, and you're also an OpenAI board member. Dan Wang, thank you so much for joining us. You're a visiting scholar at the Tsai China Center at Yale Law School, and you've been studying technology and China for many years now.
And we've just heard from Mustafa Suleyman, and he thinks that China's emerged as one of the biggest contenders in AI. So Helen, I'm just curious to start with, do you think we're overestimating China's capabilities?
It's certainly true that they're a big player. And it's also true that we shouldn't underestimate them and that we have a bit of a history of underestimating China's ability to innovate. I mean, I think 10, 15 years ago, the story, at least in Washington, D.C., where I'm based, was, yeah, China can't innovate. If they're producing things that look like new technology, it's because they've stolen them. I think that's clearly no longer true. At the same time, I think it's also very possible to overestimate them. And sometimes I think I see that as well. So are they a serious competitor? Yes. Are they eating our lunch? No.
So that copycat culture, it's fair to say that most people are thinking we're past that stage. Dan, what do you think of that?
Well, I think it's certainly the case that China focuses on different things. So President Xi Jinping is, I think, a little bit less enamored with the internet platforms, with a lot of the cryptocurrencies, with a lot of the AI businesses that Silicon Valley specializes. He's also a little bit less enamored of Wall Street and financialization and hedge funds. And if I had to think about what Xi's broad views are, it would be much closer to being something like capitalism with German characteristics, which is much more about building cars, building hydraulic pumps, building heavy machinery, the heavier the better, about all sorts of these major industrial projects. And I think China is very much a leader in things like that include electric vehicle batteries now, solar photovoltaics. It is making a lot of electronics products, and it is innovating on a huge sort of a lot of the automotive supply chain. But I think they have a little bit less of a focus on AI, and therefore there is not so much political direction anymore to really push forward these consumer applications.
I think it's fair, though, some of those areas, the US is also innovating very, very strongly. So are there any areas where China is innovating significantly better than the US?
Well, I would say something like electric vehicle batteries, where China has something like the 70% of all global expansion, all global capacity of electric vehicle batteries is now mostly in China. When it comes to the clean technology supply chain, again, these very industrial projects, these pieces of heavy machinery, that is a little bit more the focus. I think the US is really strong in things that include semiconductors, artificial intelligence, biotechnology. These are things, the smaller things where China is not so good, but there are big areas in which China is way outbuilding the US.
I mean, the semiconductors is getting significantly better in China. I mean, partly maybe as a result of the Huawei issue. Helen, what's your view on the semiconductor side of this?
So China's definitely been investing for decades in trying to have their own independent semiconductor supply chain. And they've been making some progress. The thing to know about semiconductors is there's a huge range of sophistication from the really basic semiconductors, computer chips that go in basic devices, your smart fridge, your car, up to the kind of more advanced chips that might go in a brand new iPhone, up to very advanced chips that go in kind of the data centers, gigantic warehouses full of computing, which is what you're training advanced AI systems on. So China has made a lot of progress on the more basic end of the semiconductor sort of scale, and is still really struggling to hit the most advanced end. And that's where, it's not even, you can't even say the US is, alone able to create those advanced semiconductors, but what you have is an incredibly advanced global supply chain.
Many describe artificial intelligence and its development across these two superpowers as an arms race. Is that framework misguided, do you think?
I think it's a bit misguided. I think you really want to look at what kind of AI are we talking about and in what way might it be a race. I think the place where it's clearest that it makes sense to think in a competitive framework is in kind of military domains. So, it's just true that, the US military really wants to make sure that it is keeping pace with, and ideally a little ahead of, the Chinese, a lot ahead of the Chinese military in terms of what technology they have.
Dan, Washington has taken some steps to curtail some of China's ability to get their hands on the cutting edge chips that really power these AI platforms. What's your take on that? Is that an effective strategy, or will China just find a way to build their own?
I think that China is going to try to figure out a lot of the way to build their own. A lot of the chip makers now have been under very significant stress from US sanctions dating back to about a year ago now, released by the Biden administration, that is really stopping their ability to access not just the high-end chips, but also the semiconductor production equipment as well.
And I think in general, it's really difficult to distinguish between what kinds of technologies should the US really not want China to be able to develop, and where is it fine. So, you mentioned, clean technologies before, where China, if you're looking at, manufacturing solar panels, as you mentioned, EV batteries, a lot of other areas, China is doing amazingly at that. And what you're starting to hear in some, US policymaking circles is that maybe that's a bad thing, that China is making a lot of kind of clean technology stuff. And I find that a little sort of tricky to reckon with, is at what point do we want to really shut them out or prevent them from being, able to manufacture anything if it's something good, useful that we can use. Of course, if it's technologies that we think have really significant military value, I understand, but then it starts, the lines between those categories start to get very, very blurred.
It seems like these tensions are just ratcheting it up even higher as time goes on. With each administration, they're intensifying. So to your point, if we do need these other technologies, solar technology for this transition into a greener future, what kind of happens next? How much do we place on kind of the AI arms race that could then potentially work against us in climate change? Is that a concern, or is that too far in the future still?
Well, a few months ago, Beijing did announce some export controls on certain solar technologies involved in making production wafers.
So it's already happening.
It is already happening, that there are some threats out there that, relatively speaking, Beijing has been pretty restrained against retaliating against American companies of the likes of Intel, of the likes of Tesla so far, but these things could escalate more.
how does the relationship between, you know, the ruling party in China play out against the kind of the development of companies?
I think the Chinese system is definitely more top down when it comes to AI development. You see less kind of individual tech companies like OpenAI or Google taking the lead, and more these kind of multi-institution partnerships, or maybe you have a university and a tech company and a government, you know, department all collaborating on big AI projects. That's much more common in China. At the same time, you know, China is a huge country, so there's a limit to how much the government can achieve from the top. So a lot of what you see is sort of Beijing providing direction, providing ideas, providing sort of signaling of this is what we in the central government would be excited about.
Dan, how would you compare how the Chinese government is handling AI with its people versus how they handled social media?
Well, I think President Xi Jinping doesn't necessarily view AI right now, a lot of these ChatGPT-like applications, as some of the most economically productive things that are coming into our society. So I think that President Xi looks much more at AI like, you know, he would at Facebook or Twitter, now known as X or whatever it is. These are platforms like TikTok that, you know, if you're asking me, is something like TikTok or Facebook really increasing my personal productivity? Well, I would say, actually, it is really horribly detracting from my productivity. And so I think that a lot of these AI platforms right now create speech issues. When an ordinary Chinese person sitting in Beijing or Shanghai asks AI, well, what happened in 1989? Well, what do you think of socialism? What do you think of President Xi's performance? These AI tools are having a lot of challenges actually answering socialist correct values that are in line with the government's ideas. And so these are major speech platforms, first and foremost, and perhaps not really the economically miraculous thing that raises our productivity growth at the very moment. Now, it might happen later on. Right now, I think the party views it as somewhere between economically not that useful and potentially very socially destabilizing.
So from a consumer standpoint, AI is almost, it can potentially create more problems for the Chinese Communist Party. But then if you look at it from like a surveillance standpoint or military type of AI applications, that's kind of in a different camp. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think they're definitely, I mean, one area where China is, I would say, leading in AI is on surveillance. They really have leaned hard into facial recognition, you know, voice recognition, even gait recognition. So how you walk in a crowd, can they pick you out by that? I think in the West, there's been some development of these technologies, but with a lot of criticism from civil society, a lot of hesitation, sort of, I would say, like very yellow light. And in China, it's been blaring green light.
On the topic of WeChat, I mean, when we spoke ahead of this, I think we touched on the fact that there are some generalized misunderstandings about China's approach to social media and data and AI. AI relying on huge amounts of data, and the perception is that because of things like WeChat and similar things in China, that there's this huge pool of data that the population in China is very happy giving over and is used to giving over, and therefore is just sitting around waiting to be exploited by AI. And I remember that you made a pretty significant point, but it's like, that's probably not really the case. And people think that's the case, but it isn't. So I wonder if you could touch on that.
Yeah, I think people have this perception that because the Chinese government is very controlling and has a lot of access to what's going on in Chinese citizens' private lives, that means that there's these beautifully curated, you know, extremely complete large databases of information that can be used to train AI systems or to do other things. But for anyone who's ever worked with data, you know that cleaning data, structuring data, making sure that the right information is flowing in the right places is incredibly challenging. So it's both true that the Chinese government can get very detailed information on the private lives of its citizens if it chooses to, and also true that it's incredibly messy the way that works, and incredibly difficult for any given actor to get access to something. So for instance, a company trying to train some AI model using data is actually subject to a pretty significant data governance setup in China, data governance regulations that make it really challenging to use customers' data for things it wasn't already designed for, or that you didn't already get consent for.
Which we learned from Cambridge Analytica scandal just as one case, and there are many others. That is not the case in the US. It's
That's
not
right.
the case in Europe. There's a lot going on. I mean, the EU's AI Act is pretty widely praised by some people, not everybody, but it's quite broad and far-reaching. But that's not the case in China. in terms of what you're saying?
So China's setup is now more similar to the GDPR that exists in Europe. So around kind of protecting consumer data and giving people the right to, opt in to different uses. Of course, in China, there's always the exception, unless the security services, think that you might be a dissident, and then they're going to get whatever they want on you. But in terms of kind of companies, they're certainly relatively restricted in what they can do.
Switching gears a little bit, Dan, I'm curious about how China's sluggish economic growth recently weighs into the government's calculus and how they're thinking about AI's potential to spark social unrest.
I think that the Communist Party is very much involved in trying to think about, how to control possible social unrest. I was in Shanghai in November 2022 when there were protests in the streets denouncing zero COVID, denouncing the Communist Party by name, that these were things that were erupting. And so I very much sign on to Helen's description of AI, that China is leading in the AI of censorship. It is leading in the AI of facial recognition. That right now it looks very much like the US is a place where ordinary consumers can tinker with and play around on a lot of these AI tools, whereas in China is mostly reserving these very powerful tools for its own use, potentially to control society. That right now, China is in a moment of economic weakness. This might deteriorate further, this might get a little bit better, but there is always this presence hovering over there that the state security might ramp up its technology, really to make sure that there are no socially destabilizing incidents.
Well, Helen, Dan, thank you so much for being here. It's been great to learn from the both of you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back to The Deal. I'm Jason Kelly.
I'm Alex Rodriguez.
All right, today we've got a banger of an episode. Robin Arzon, she is not only a top Peloton instructor, she's a top executive at the company. Plus, she's building this whole empire outside of Peloton.
Jason, she's a force of nature. I mean, she went from being a corporate litigator to being one of the top influencers in the country. And I'm really interested to know how she's transferred some of those skills from being a corporate litigator to being one of the most influential people in sports.
Absolutely. She's talking about investing in teams. There is nothing she can't do, and she is full of energy. Coming up, Robin Arzon. Robin Arzon, we are so happy to see you. Welcome to The Deal. I mean, I've known you a little bit. I feel like I know you really well, which is part of the reason that we're going to get into this amazing brand you built and this connection you have with people. But I have to say, Alex, we've been talking about the fact our phones have been blowing up about the fact that we're sitting here with you, right?
Yes. Well, first of all, no one's more excited than Jason, and as a result, I'm also very excited because my phone's been blowing up. My girlfriend Jack, my daughters who love Peloton, but they love you. But like, I thought we were interviewing like Taylor Swift today. I mean, it's really exciting.
Yeah.
But you're also like a corporate lawyer. First of all, I do want to know, like, how'd you go from being a lawyer to where you are now?
Well, I was a corporate litigator, and my dad was a lawyer growing up. And I used to sit on his blue books. And he was also a law professor, a real estate law professor in Philadelphia. He taught at Temple, went to and taught at Temple. And so I kind of grew up with the law. When I was 10 years old, you asked me, back to school, what am I going to be? It was a lawyer. So I did practice law for 8 years. I was a corporate litigator, and I was underwhelmed. If you asked me if I hated it, I didn't hate it. It was a malaise that I think is pretty pervasive, frankly, in a lot of industries, but especially law. And I fell in love with running. So I started running when I was in law school. I really started running to run through a really traumatic incident that happened when I was in college. And I wrote about that in my first book, Shut Up and Run. And that actually used to be my mantra. It was like, stop the chatter, let's shut it up, let's lace up and run. And I started doing marathons and ultra marathons while I was still practicing law. And I had this moment where I thought, I can't count down to only like 20 minutes in Central Park that were my release throughout the week. And I had such admiration for athletes who made this their lives. And I thought, how can I pay my rent with something that I love? I quit law 2 weeks before the London Olympic Games. And with a cracked iPhone, I went and slept on my friend's couch and just, quote, reported from the games. And so this is kind of an influencer marketing was like just becoming a thing. And I kind of hit lightning in a bottle like at that time, really recording and documenting my athletic experience as a person who's not a professional athlete.
I have a quick follow-up on that because you worked at one of the most respected law firms. So explain to me, like, when is the moment that you look in the mirror and say, I'm at a great law firm, I have a great career, great trajectory, young lawyer, doing well, I want to go do something else?
Yeah.
Most people would think that's crazy.
Well, especially like, I don't know, I come from a refugee immigrant family. My dad, grew up in the Bronx and was born in Puerto Rico. My mom is a Cuban refugee. And to think that I would leave something that was so secure to do question mark, question mark, question. I didn't even know. I was like building the rocket ship as it was leaving the station. The fact that they supported me was amazing. Not supporting me financially, but emotionally, right? I told my mom and my dad, you are never going to have to pay a dime. I'm going to figure this out myself. And I lived well below my means when I was a lawyer, and I just saved. And it was actually at a crossroads of buying an apartment or leaving law. It was like, am I going to be all in, or am I going to give myself like financial freedom? And thank goodness that I did, because I was able to take really big bets on myself that if I were tethered to, a mortgage, trying to aspire to, live like the Joneses in New York City, like that's a pretty high bar.
Do you remember the moment you made the decision when you're like, this is happening?
I think it's iterative, right? That there are lots of different inflection points. So it was probably a 2-year slow burn where I was like, I really love this other thing. This thing is just okay. And I would come home. I was still working like 80-hour weeks. I still had billable hour requirements and partners that I really respected, actually, and learned a lot from. But it was this malaise that I mentioned. So I remember coming home one night from the office, Seamless, it was called Seamless Web at the time, was like my best friend, ordering whatever on the client's time, but like still working right through dinner. And I got home at 11:19, and I opened up the notes app on my phone, and I just made a list of the things that I thought I was good at and that I wanted to be able to showcase in the world. There was no wrong answer. And it was literally be able to show my tattoos, be able to use my oral advocacy skills on a wider scale, be able to, talk about sports as somebody who was not an athlete historically. And, literally it was like be able to run, be able to sweat. And it's what my job is now at Peloton and beyond, to the letter.
Yeah.
You could call it business planning, manifestation, mumbo jumbo. It worked because I was able to clarify with specificity how I wanted to feel in this new life. And then it was like, okay, I got to marry skill set with opportunity, and now I at least know what to look for. And that was probably 6 months before I quit, and then 2 weeks before the London Olympic Games, I just pulled off the Band-Aid, and I was like, look, I just need to be around these athletes. I need to be around the people who are talking about sport and living it, and I just wanted to be in their orbit, like breathe the same air. Not obviously as a fan, but as somebody who could like engage in conversation with these people. And that was the objective. And I remember going to one of the track practices and talking to the USATF PR person, and like I was like, I just want to ask Alta Felix one question, and now we're she's my friend.
She's your girl.
Yeah. So it's just amazing how you peel the layers of the onion, and like there's always more there.
I think about being a Yankee for a long time and playing baseball for over 25 years. Some of the virtues and characteristics that I've taken from sports to bring to the boardroom. I'm curious, talk about lawyer. You have to be buttoned up. You can't show your tattoos. You can't really show any emotion, opposite of what you're doing now. But was there anything you took that you learned in law that's helped you be such a great communicator and a connector to people?
For sure, as a storyteller, I think if you can make a legal brief interesting, you can do a lot with more interesting topics. But the billable hours model that I lifted from my law career directly impacted my ability to see movement and my ideas around storytelling within the wellness umbrella as a business. Because during the beginning of these influencer marketing days, it was a lot of gifted products and like PR packages, which are still obviously relevant now. But back then, it wasn't really you pay an influencer for a campaign. It was like, I'm going to give you shoes, and you're just going to be so grateful that I gave you shoes that you're not really going to know the value, the marketing dollars of what you just gave me. And obviously, we're so deeply grateful to receive product. I still am, but that's not going to pay my rent. Like my landlord was not going to be like, thanks for these Nikes, And so I adopted a billable hours model, and I just said, no, you can't pick my brain. I'm a consultant.
Oh.
And some brands said no, but enough said yes. And then I was being booked not only as talent, but also as a consultant for these marketing agencies.
The key issue right now for us in the diamond space is the declared divestment of Anglo from GPS. And as you know, Anglo holds 85% stake in GPS. Botswana, the government of the Republic of Botswana holds 15%. We are resolute now, and we've communicated a firm intention to increase our stake in GPS to a controlling stake. We have lined up a number of potential collaborators with us, if I may put it that way. We have targeted funders, we have parties, we have the Oman Sovereign Wealth Fund, we have others who are willing and ready.
Astonishing day for US technology.
Shaping the region's technology ecosystem.
Asia's biggest tech news and innovation.
It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, only on Bloomberg.
How do you discover Peloton? So 2012, you're talking about. Peloton is what?
Peloton was probably its like co-founders plus a few initial leadership folks. They hadn't opened the studio yet. And I read about Peloton in an article, and then I reached out to the company Cold.
Cold email.
Cold email. Yeah, so during this time, I was teaching cycling at a local spin studio. I was working on my first book, and I was about to publish my first book when I started a Peloton. I was one of the first instructors hired, and we had our original studio on 23rd Street.
So, Robin, one of the great advantages to being a lawyer is being a supreme great writer like this guy, Jason. What did that email say?
Well, I wanted to sell the vision, the passion, and a little bit of the skill set. And I was a newer spin instructor, right? So I couldn't say, like, I've been in this industry X amount of years. But I told them that I saw how disruptive this technology could be, and I wanted to light fires. Like, I want to light fires in people's lives. And that is still one of my core mandates for all of my businesses. It's got to light fires.
Yeah.
And they kind of believed the passion of the email, and then it was followed up 2 days later with an audition. And then you're seeing, like, can you walk the walk?
Yeah.
And thankfully they accepted.
And so how do you prepare for an audition? Like, you're teaching classes, so you know what you're doing, but I assume, you know, you have to get used to, as someone who has taken a lot of Peloton classes, you're speaking to a camera. I mean, you're speaking to me, but I'm in my basement. Like, how do you, like, lock in to communicate like that? How do you develop that skill?
Well, for me, it definitely started as a lawyer. Like, I used to walk around my apartment and pretend that I was speaking to, you know, really it was less courtroom stuff, a lot of deposition stuff, and I would practice that Q&A and kind of the mental gymnastics of, like, if they say this, I'm going to say this. And obviously when you're presenting a class or a speech or something, it's different. It's not usually like a volley back and forth. I almost visualize it like I'm writing it on a board, and those are the things that end up coming into my notes.
Really?
Yeah.
Like when you're on the bike?
No, before.
Oh,
so I'm always prepping my class plan and my playlist beforehand.
Right.
And then I'm usually listening to the playlist as I'm going into the studio.
Okay.
And the things that I want to say in class are kind of embedded. Like, I visually see it.
Wow.
Yeah. And sometimes it's for my self-talk, and then sometimes it's imagining Jason, you know, across from, who is that red light?
Yeah.
There's enough of a feedback loop with our members, via social media, or sometimes obviously if they're in the studio, that I kind of have a sense of what the conversation is around certain types of movement, certain types of classes.
And Robin, when you get off, I mean, obviously in baseball, when you have a good game, the scoreboard will tell you if you have a good game or not, right? So it's very, very easy. When you get off that bike, do you know, was this a 10? Was it a 9? Was it a 5? Do you know if you had a great class and if you hit all your points?
I mean, energy is currency, right? Like, there's just a moment where you know whether you hit it and whether you were in a flow state, right? Like, if I'm in a flow state in most of my classes. When I'm not, it's just life, it's distraction, it's my kid, it's whatever, it's life. And my job is to refocus myself, and I have tools and tactics to do that, like any athlete would. But that is the interesting thing, is that we're maybe more like a TV network.
Yeah.
And that I'll get like the numbers and things like that with my producers later. And I'll be like, oh, this class was gangbusters. I'm like, really? That 20-minute Tabata class was like this, right? But I really, and then this is what I say to the other instructors, like, we have the responsibility to walk into every class like it is an audition to be there. And if you do not have the appetite to treat every class like it's an audition to be there, then you don't belong on the team anymore.
Wow.
And that's truly the standard that I try to hold to myself. I'm not saying every class is a 10 out of 10, but I do approach the work ethic with that respect.
Well, and it's interesting too, because, you know, pretty quickly you get to a point, because, you know, you and I first met when I was anchoring the Bloomberg Business Week show. We came out to a homecoming event. Homecoming, is that?
Yeah, well, it was homecoming.
Okay, yeah, back in the
It's
day.
evolved since then.
Right,
yeah.
back in the day. And I mean, at that point, you know, this is 10 years ago, probably 8-10 years ago, you know, you were already in a position where you were the lead instructor. So how does it get to the point where you're not just an instructor, but, you know, John Foley, co-founder and then CEO, like, gives you the responsibility to, like, essentially, to your point, sort of run the network in terms of the talent side?
Yeah, well, our chief content officer has the C-level role
Sure.
of, like, quote, running the network, and I report to them. You know, our current CCO is Jen Cotter, and I've worked with her for a number of years. But when I was promoted, it was, you know, pretty early days in Peloton. I do think that my law degree helped.
Yeah.
I was able to uniquely sit in meetings and kind of understand, like, business KPIs and also understand the talent needs. Sometimes I'm wearing talent hats, sometimes I'm wearing, like, an executive hat.
Yeah.
And it could be one meeting. I might swap those hats many, many times. but it's, you know, championing the instructor's points of view, because I mean, it didn't always, Peloton didn't go into the talent business, but it's now in the talent business.
Oh yeah.
But that wasn't initially, that perspective wasn't always appreciated,
Right.
especially when group fitness was a lot more common back in those days with other competitors. It was like, yeah, I'm here to teach a cycling class, but I'm a business.
Right.
And it took some iterating on that concept.
So, Robin, when you think about wearing different hats, when you look at talent, what are the first 2 or 3 things you look? I mean, obviously, when I look at a baseball player, I'm looking for speed, I'm looking for a great arm, I'm looking for a great body. Someone's going to age well. What are the things that you look for in a great talent?
I think at this point we're really proud of the diversity and the breadth that we have with our instructor team, and we scale obviously, right? So we don't need 5 of the same exact type of instructor or musicality. I want a point of view, right? So there's a physicality obviously to what we do, but you have to be an athlete. Clearly, you have to have certifications. You need to be a subject matter expert, but that's like a dime a dozen. I want somebody who has a point of view that can translate that to after thousands of hours of doing it. Because somebody can audition and BS something for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You can't really do that when you're sprinting, when you're on your, 1,000th class.
Yeah.
Like there is just something that is very raw and real. And that is where you get to the kernel of somebody's point of view.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute global news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Jemana Versace in Beirut, and this is Bloomberg.
The countdown is on. Everything you need to get the edge at the end of the market day. Get ahead of tomorrow's trading with The Close. Weekdays on Bloomberg. Context changes everything. It's the world's second largest economy with a growing influence in global affairs. Bloomberg The China Show brings you the unmatched expertise you need to keep track of breaking news, in-depth market analysis, and the most influential newsmakers in and around China.
We need to do more to engage the market more. We're risk on. I think we caught a little sweet spot.
Massive savings right now.
It's already a different game.
Bloomberg The China Show. Weekdays around the world, right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything. Tune in to Bloomberg Business Week Daily.
We got to talk crypto.
From the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead.
What's the conversation around your company?
Bringing you insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy.
Planning very big things.
A new level of premium.
Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens.
The floodgates of innovation are going to open up.
You can't fake fashion. You either are or you aren't.
Bloomberg Business Week Daily, only on Bloomberg.
Because you also, I mean, what's also clear, and you have an incredible following. We want to talk about sort of how you built your brand, but like, as you look at who's resonating, numbers don't lie, and like you see the views, and you also see the to use a marketing term, those classes or those instructors who have a long tail. So, how do you think about growing your own community, but also sort of growing these complementary communities as you again create that right mix of instructors?
Right. I mean, we've always been a members first organization. So we want to meet our members where they are in their various life stages, right? And so from a content perspective, we're considering, what are people doing? How are they moving? And how can we meet them there? Or even widen the aperture of like what it means to have wellness offerings, including non-class content. So we introduced nutrition content with some of our instructors. I'm coming out with a cookbook next year based on my plant-based philosophy and point of view on eating and those recipes. So it's important to meet members where they are, but also honor the life stage and the evolution. Like I am not the same person that I was, 12, 13 years ago when I joined the company. And so it included creating prenatal content. It's obviously entering the longevity conversation with something that is purposeful and having content that pairs with it, but also having a roster. Like we do want younger instructors.
Yeah,
we do want instructors that are going to meet growing demos as well as honoring our core. And then we do look at demos for certain instructors, and it's where's their crossover, where's their expansion opportunity, where is their business as usual, where we just know it's working and we don't want to mix the drinks too much. It's like some folks kind of have their core,
Yeah.
and then some folks are more expansive to demos that we do want to explore.
It is funny. I mean, to think about it. And Carolyn Tish-Watchett, who you worked with obviously
Yes,
back in the
love her.
day, she was on the show as well, and obviously was a key voice in sort of a lot of the branding and sort of growing you guys as brands. One of the deals that you did early on is Adidas. You established a relationship. How does that come about? I mean, clearly you had your eye on the prize of like building your own brand. Tell us about Adidas.
So I started to understand that there were marketing dollars in these deals from initially working on the agency side, and Nike Women was my client. So I was doing their social media, and I started to get a little bit of visibility into like how these campaigns are kind of run and funded.
So you were consulting.
I was
Okay,
consulting.
okay,
So
okay.
I was on the agency side with a agency called Team Epiphany, and Nike Women was their client. And this was literally 3 weeks after the London Olympic Games. It was like my first job out of law. I was like, heck yeah, I want to do this.
Yeah.
And then I realized 6 months later, oh, like I want to be the talent that they're booking. And it was kind of the Wild West too. Like where marketing dollars was like, oh, maybe we don't need $1 million commercial. We're gonna splice it up this other way. That became my first foray into even the terminology. Like I didn't know that world at all. And then in the early days of joining Peloton, my first book came out, and that book got me on the radar of an agent. So I joined WME. I was with WME for a number of years. I'm now more recently with UTA. But then I was like, oh, I have an agent. This is a business. Like this, there are ways for me to structure these conversations, and of course, lean on folks who know this stuff. And they were used to endorsement deals with, the A-Rods of the world. And I was one of the first brand sponsored deals with Adidas for somebody who's not a professional athlete.
Wow.
And it was pretty purely based on like brand recognition of the regular person and social media KPIs.
Yeah.
And then of course, the services that were built in there, where it was, event appearances and photo shoots. And I remember I had done some modeling before my Adidas deal, but I remember being on set for my very first huge, massive Adidas campaign. And they had like a body double for me. And they were like asking me is this okay? Would you wear this? And I'm like, oh, my opinion is relevant here?
Yeah.
And then I realized, right, I'm representing myself as well as the brand in the marketplace. And that was when I was like, that synergy has to exist. And whenever there isn't that synergy, then I know that it's probably not the right place for me.
Yeah.
So then the light goes up, then you go, oh my gosh, so I'm a brand.
Yeah.
I also represent Peloton. And Adidas thinks I'm pretty cool. How'd you think about scaling that opportunity?
Well, I was with Adidas for, I think, almost 5 years. And then I started thinking, like, what do I already use and consume and experience that makes sense? I think I've worked with over 40 brands in, like, the 12 years since I've had these deals. And now I'm definitely at the place where it's like, I want to go deeper with fewer brands. Back then, I think it was very common for, like, oh, I'm just going to post this one social media thing. And it's a lot of, like, a lot of little
Like
smaller
one-offs
stuff.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
And that was very much part of the game back then, but I think it's now more curated for sure. At least from my perspective, it's much more curated. And I don't really do social media only deals ever anymore. It's usually a hybrid ownership stake or some kind of advisory thing that is more than just a brand deal. It really opened my eyes to different categories, different verticals. So it wasn't just things that were adjacent to movement and athletics. It was, for example, when I had my first child, it was a toy line. And then that was, a royalty deal that was a toy line, Bebe Fuerte, that was based on IP from my children's books that were, in Walmarts all across the country. These are things I could not even have imagined.
Yeah.
But my life stage and the opportunities met.
Yeah.
So as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the NBA and the WNBA. And I'm involved with the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Lynx, and I'm very passionate about this. And my background's baseball, so I come from a little bit different world, but some things cross over. And what I'm thinking about is the culture you've created inside the four walls. I'm thinking to myself as you're speaking, how do we create that culture and energy and light the fire inside the four walls at Target Center where both teams play? Mm-hmm. I know you're a consultant, but if you want to give me some free advice or I can pay you later, what kind of things would you be thinking about? When you have 20,000 people, there's a lot of heat in the room, teams are doing well. How would you think about it, high level?
I mean, I think it's storytelling and ritual. I think that's what's
Ritual,
so
you said.
ritual.
Ah.
I think that's what's so cool about fandom.
What do you mean by that?
So there's the story that we all understand, and is that like what the media is capturing, conversations like this. I think especially with social media, it's like user-generated content of the fandom. That is what I think is so interesting about seeing what members post. Because there's like things that you can't plan, like curiosities around yellow, for example. Like yellow became a thing because I was just, yellow's kind of my power color, and I would naturally wear that for tough classes, like Tabata classes, interval sprints, race day. And now that's a thing. Like people wear yellow for these classes, and it is associated, and now it's going to be incorporated into some products that I have coming out, athletic products, because there's a
Wow.
thing about that.
Right.
So that's what I mean about what's the story and then what's the ritual. And can you kind of pair those things, you know, from a product perspective or even a storytelling perspective, you know, before the games, after the games.
Yeah.
And then of course there's like the adjacent things like fashion and stuff where there's just little hooks
Yeah.
that you kind of have to marry like the details with the larger story. And it's finding the right people who can like notice the details, like, oh, fans are kind of doing this weird thing. Whether they spot it in the venue or on social media, and then you make it a thing. And then that becomes a snowball.
Connect the dots.
The ritual point is really interesting too, because the ritual of class, I mean, I've been at Peloton for 8 years. It is ritual based. You know, it is like, it's a routine in the same way that like showing up to a game or watching a game, being connected. I mean, you know better than anyone the rituals of baseball.
Oh yeah. And there's superstition, like
right.
fans wear the same colors if you win. If your favorite player, Anthony Edwards, scores 40,
right.
they'll post about it and like do something weird about it, or they drank a certain thing.
Right.
And the idea is, how do we just connect those dots?
Yeah.
And spotting what's already naturally happening, and then
Yeah.
communicating what the players and what the teams are doing, because people just love understanding like what's the morning routine, what's the ritual, what do you do pre-show, like and unpacking that and like telling that story in a way that is appropriate for the brand. So I'm really curious, Alex, as how do you choose the teams? You know, you entered sports teams ownership groups that are not baseball. So how did you do that? Because I just recently invested in a football club, a women's football club in Europe. I can't announce the team name yet, but I was a little trepidatious because I'm not like a soccer expert, but I'm so passionate, and this opportunity came across my desk, and it's like, how do you toe that line of like, I can offer something here? Because for me, it's not just the dollars.
Yeah.
It's like I also want to be able to sit in seats like this and be like, this, I believe in this.
A cidade estava sitiada.
Nisso eu começo, eu tremia, não sabia o que fazer. Foi a mais terrível que eu passei na minha vida.
Eu temo, né, que o Brasil se torne, num futuro próximo, um narco-estado.
Porque no final, tudo é dinheiro.
People become their suffering, and someone is driving a Range Rover with their money.
Where is my money?
I think she's a scam up to now.
It's some of the world's most desperate people who are getting ripped off.
Repeat after me. I am a winner.
I didn't know how big it was. I didn't really understand what I was getting myself into.
If you tell me you have a vision of being $1 billion business, then you're going to have to do what it takes. And if you're not going to do that, everybody's going to suffer.
نشوف على يقول أحمد الشوارع كم أحمد الكم مانجا اللي هاي كل ما منا.
Una batalla a muerte.
Money can do a lot of good. It can really transform people's lives, but it can also hurt them.
From the beating heart of global finance, economics and politics, and wherever newsmakers are moving markets, Bloomberg brings you conversations that allow for deep discussions and important insights. What do you think the future is for inflation? Is this new normal? Are markets too optimistic? How do you worry about the things that are outside your control? How does the current fighting completely stop? I'm Francine Lacroix, and this is The Pulse, every weekday only on Bloomberg.
Why do the biggest names in business choose Bloomberg Television?
That's a great
It's a
question.
very good question.
Interesting question. Good question.
Great question.
I so appreciate that question. You certainly ask interesting questions.
Bloomberg Television. Top experts, great questions.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Robin, that's a great question. Like, so for me, Magic Johnson was kind of like my North Star. He was one of my heroes, someone that I just loved so much. Going back to the Laker days at Showtime with Pat Riley. And it's interesting, he went from the hardwood to the boardroom. He also went from the court to baseball ownership with the Dodgers. And I've gone from baseball to basketball. And when Magic and I talk, we often are advising each other, him on the Timberwolves and the Lynx, and me for the Dodgers. But in a weird way, I think 60% you have a crossover. You still want great character, well-conditioned athletes, create a great culture, create heat inside those four walls we spoke about. And I'm a firm believer of just go out and hire the best people in the world and get the hell out of the way.
Yep.
And I think not everyone does that. And because I don't know, I'm not an expert in basketball, I actually think that works in my favor. I don't know if I'll be such a great baseball owner, to be honest with you, because I maybe know too much and I would probably get more frustrated. But with basketball, I'm in all of all our players, the men and the women. And they're incredible and they're young. And I get to talk to them about all the mistakes that I've made and hopefully they can avoid those mistakes. And I have a great partner, Mark Laurie. So I actually love it. And I love learning. I love planting seeds. Every day I study 5 or 6 hours every day about basketball, whether I'm asking Jason questions or I'm reading or I'm listening to podcasts. So I've enjoyed it and I wish you the best of luck. And they're very lucky to have you because you bring something that I wish we had from a partner's point of view because you see the world from a different lens than all of us do. So yellow's the color.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm inspired. I'm really inspired.
And so help us understand, and I know Alex has, sort of done this same balancing act. You're on a team, you work for a company, you run a team, and yet you're a brand in your own right. You're doing your own deals. How do you balance that? How does it work? How do you approach it? It seems like this was the plan from the beginning, but how has it evolved?
So there used to be one-off conversations. It was just like, hey, I'm publishing a book next week. Oh, okay, great. Now there's an internal process, right? We have 50 plus instructors globally, and there are lots of conversations that are happening within the walls of Peloton and outside of it, but they have to run in parallel tracks. Whether the P on my chest is outside my clothing or underneath my clothing, it's always there. Just like the players are always, part of the organization.
Still a Yankee.
You're part of that organization, and so there are things that are wellness adjacent that are obviously we talk about that with much more specificity, and there's stuff like my children's book or things that kind of were outside of the scope that I would never do within the Peloton walls anyway, and so usually that's a green light. But there are conversations for sure, and with our leadership team, and obviously our marketing team, has points of view on it, but our CCO is really integral to that conversation. And now we're at the place where our agents and our managers and our external teams have a relationship with the stakeholders at Peloton.
Right.
So it's really like one big conversation.
So following up right on that, I mean, kind of wearing two hats again, right? Like you're the team player for Peloton, one of the great leaders, and you're also running your own kind of family office.
Yeah.
So when you think about your family office, how does your team look, and how do you kind of vet deals, and where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years?
I mean, hiring the team is the most crucial thing in the world, especially because I'm really at the juncture where I need to understand what scales beyond my physical presence. And now it's thinking of, for example, the short answer is I work with my husband, who serves as my manager, and he's also my business partner. He has a history in business, so he's a subject matter expert in a lot of this stuff. And then in the deal details, we obviously lean on my agent and our legal team. We have a PR team, so there's lots of spokes to the wheel. But the core of the strategy is my internal team, right? So we have a chief strategy officer, and it's important that we all align, and they keep me kind of I know I'm very, I think one of my superpowers is being incredibly decisive. So I know whether I want to do something, but 90% of the time the answer is no. And the no's usually come from leaning on, you know, business advice from people who actually understand trends and dollars.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what we consider. 3 to 5 years. You know, I want to continue to build in the lifestyle space. So whether that's food or beauty or fashion, I personally am still going to be continuing to compete and get strong. You know, I want to continue to be strong and be an athlete and model that for women and girls, especially. So on a personal level, like I will continue to be moving my body, but on a professional level, I want to widen the aperture of how I'm seen, right? So it's not just Robin who teaches Peloton classes. I also am, you know, on the speaker circuit. I also, you know, I published 5 books. And now I want to get into beauty and fashion as well.
Right. And so it feels like, you know, you look at IP very closely in the deals that you're doing. And I mean, it's interesting, you know, we started off talking about your history as a lawyer. You're still a lawyer. I mean, it feels like that still plays a really big part in sort of how you do your deal making. Is that fair?
Every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a strategy. I think as a lawyer, there are puzzle pieces that you're always trying to fit. And the overarching thing is at least as a litigator, I think even as a corporate attorney, you're understanding narrative.
Yeah.
And that was when I understood narrative a little bit more specifically.
Yeah.
And narrative as a tool. And obviously now as a creator in social media, that's deeply relevant. But in creating Swagger Society with my husband, I initially co-founded Swagger Society in the Web3 days as a membership club. And then we were like, okay, well, clearly the landscape is changing there, and it migrated into a media company. So under the Swagger Society umbrella, we have a wholly owned podcast that will launch, a newsletter, and production company.
Yeah.
And these are conversations that were like seeds. And I was like, oh, let's pull on that thread a little bit. Let's look at titans in the industry like Reese and Eva and Shonda and just learn from them. And they are my
Reese Witherspoon, Eva Longoria, Shonda Rhimes.
Yes.
Just name checking.
You know, and they are obviously, I mean, iconic.
Yeah.
And I'm just learning and watching and understanding and then trying to see like, okay, if I took a literal, not even a page, if I just took a paragraph out of that book, what would it look like for me and what would infuse joy? And that is a threshold that I'm not willing to sacrifice on. Like if I'm not filled with joy, and I get joy from hard work, by the way, so it's not like it's all
right
walking through lily pads. But if there's not joy in it for me, it's just a no.
Right.
Peru is maybe first country inspired to me to how can I use the different ingredients. First time we went to Peru, trying to culture food, I never had this ingredients never used in Japan. Kind of like a wow, you know, and cilantros, chili, garlic, and olive oils. So a lot of good seafoods, complete a different way. Example, they have the fresh fish, but Japan the fresh fish uses sashimi, but Peru use fresh fish, make that called the ceviche, cooked with the lemon juice. You never use the soy sauce. First time I eat this, kind of the wow. So then after this one, my open eye more, my cooking style that change, combine to Japanese style and another country food, then make normal style.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories.
The economy has been doing well. That does not tell you what the future is going to be.
We are taking a step-by-step approach, a very systematic approach with India.
This is a time to put a little more defense into your portfolio.
Insight with Haslinda Anand, only on Bloomberg.
At a time when policy in Washington is driving Wall Street, we draw a distinction between the rhetoric and the action, bringing you market-moving guests and original reporting. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Bring
Bringing you up-to-the-minute political news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Tyler Kendall in Washington, and this is Bloomberg.
I really like how you articulated earlier 90% no and being super disciplined about what you say yes to. I call it, I used to go wide and shallow, and now I go narrow and deep, and it's been a lot more productive for me. When it comes to deal flow, does your team go out and try to find deal flow, or if you like a company that identifies to your soul, do you kind of cold call and say, hey, can we take a meeting? Or are you just inbounding and whatever comes in, you get the best of what's coming in?
It's both. I think now I'm at the point where I could be I want to be more strategic. Like I want to say like, I love this product or I love this vertical and let's go for it. That involves, strategic conversations like who do we know at this place and this place? What are the top 3? What would be the dream collab or licensing deal or whatever it is? Or what would the deal look like, right? So like, I think before I was so stuck in how many social posts, how many appearances, how many photo shoots? And now it's like, no, let's play the long game. Like, are we talking about, is this a board seat? Is that, you know what I mean? Like these are different conversations now.
Yeah.
And that's exciting, but it's also really daunting.
Right.
Because it's like, it could be anything.
Yeah.
And it's not just about a liquid dollar amount. It's different now.
Yeah. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about Peloton. Speaking of narratives, if we were sitting here in front of our respective Bloomberg terminals, we'd look and we'd be like, whoa, that was a big high. And now it is not where it was. It has been quite a journey, to say the least. You're still there. Like, you have stuck through it. Why?
Oh, gosh. I have always believed, I still believe. I think that I have the unique privilege of seeing, and I'm not exaggerating, millions of comments over the years of people whose lives are changed. And if you don't know, you don't know, and it's our job to widen the group of people who know how special the fitness experience is, the wellness experience is, and when that light bulb goes off and somebody understands the quality of fitness content that they have at their fingertips, there is nothing, it is unparalleled. And, we continue building, we continue iterating, and I'm willing to ride the wave because at my core, I mentioned that in recruiting instructors, they have to have a point of view. My point of view is that I will light fires globally in the tens of millions, and Peloton will be a key to doing that because we are going to move the needle and make people healthier. I want to add years to people's lives, but I also want to add life to their years, and we're doing that at Peloton every day to millions of folks.
I mean, you're a leader inside the company. How do you sort of galvanize the troops? Because I have to think, in the four walls of your company, people are looking to you for belief, for that sort of thing. And you laid out a very good case for what it's doing. How hard has it been at times though to be like, listen guys, we're doing this, like it's happening. Like I know we had this high, but now we're, we're grinding it out, we're doing the work. How do you keep people motivated? I mean, we're all in a position where we have to motivate people who work with us.
Right. I mean, leaders do that every day, right? It's interesting to be on a team where there's lots of public figures that you're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
And so, they have their ear to the ground too, right? Like it's not just what the street is saying. It's like, what are you seeing in your inbox, in your comments, on social media? What conversations are you having in the marketplace? I think, I don't know. I don't ride really high highs or let the low lows. Like I just have to have a really even keeled mentality, and it does come back to that. Like, was the class I just filmed my audition tape? Like, what if it all boiled down to that one class? Would I be proud of it? And I think keeping it that granular and keeping myself that checked, and then communicating that obviously to the team. And it's interesting because I have executive function, but I'm also, the rules apply to me. I'm still doing the same job they're doing. So I think that there's a credibility there because it's like, we're just truly in this together.
Yeah.
And we have successfully created camaraderie in a bubble amongst our team globally that it's like I will rep my people and they will rep me. And that's how I think the team really respects that.
I feel like you need to bring her in for motivational.
I was thinking the same
You're
thing.
repping me, I'm repping you. We're all that. I feel that way about the deal. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
we should say that
We're
to
in
each
it,
other.
we're in it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm repping you, you're repping me, bro. So, Alex talked about the next 3 to 5 years. I guess what I would love to ask is like the right now, and sort of as you assess and look around, you're clearly at, maybe you've had multiple catalytic points in your career. This feels like, it feels like you are in a mode where you are leveling up. You're talking about ownership. You're talking about, all these, kind of, I think Alex would agree, sort of next level athlete things. Does it feel like that to you? Does it feel like this is another one of those like leaps forward?
It definitely does. Strategically and financially, I understand that. Like, I'm having conversations that I would have only dreamed about. But also, I have such a day one mentality that it's hard for me to sometimes like make those things match, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, have you made it? What's your most? No, of course I haven't made
Sure.
it. Like, none of us have. If you really think about it, like, we're out here like grinding, and that I love that. So I'm having different conversations now, and the stakes have changed, especially when my own money is involved.
Yeah.
But it also, I'm a student, and so it's just finding the places where I am confident and leaning into that, and then admitting when I don't know something, and that being okay too.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm in these conversations where I am known, but around the table I'm like, what are they talking about? Like, I don't need this deal. Like, these financial terms are like beyond me, and I'm okay asking questions.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geoeconomic news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Bonnie Quinn in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and this is Bloomberg.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
Right, okay, ready?
David, what initially sparked your interest in this topic of longevity?
15 years ago, I turned 60, and I began to wonder how much longer I'm likely to live and what I could do to extend my life. On longevity, I talked with the leading experts in science and medicine to educate people about how they might be able to change their conduct so that they can live a happier and healthier life. I'm David Rubenstein. Join me on a 4-part journey as I explore the great quest for longevity, only on Bloomberg.
Middle East and Africa. Vibrant resources and high-yield investment opportunities abound. Join me on Horizons Middle East and Africa for the stories, newsmakers, and insights from this exciting region. Now weekdays, only on Bloomberg.
Get your fixed income fix. Watch Bloomberg Real Yield around the world right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
I think as I listen to you, I'm so inspired, Robin, because I think the 3 of us, well, we've done a few things in our lives. I think all of us feel like we're in the super early innings of our career.
Yeah.
I mean, many days I feel like I'm in the bottom of the first inning in business, especially because, I was busy playing baseball for a long time, and now I'm in my pivot, right, which is business. And you're the same thing, and Jason's made some wild pivots too. I think it's exciting. I think having that thirst and curiosity is the one common theme. I mean, we're all very curious. And some of the great mentors that I've had, they all have that same characteristics. They want to ask questions, and they listen more than they talk,
Well, and I am sitting here, thinking about where you are on this stage, and I'll ask a question. This is a guy, my partner here, who, was a standout athlete from an early age and was getting a lot of attention. Goes to the major leagues right out of high school. You had a different journey, and so basically people knew who he was. He's on the cover of Sports Illustrated with Derek Jeter. Like, we all know that story. For you, it was a very different journey. What was it like, and what is it like where you can't walk down the street without people? I mean, people must shout at you across the street. Like, what is that like for someone who, went to NYU, corporate litigator with Paul Hastings, like, you're doing your thing. It's a different world you live in now. What does that feel like?
I mean, it's an honor, right? It is an honor. Like, that's beyond. And usually the interactions, it'll be like, oh, Robin, whatever, at the US Open, it was like literally, it's so charming and exciting still when somebody's like, oh, hey, I know you, I just took your whatever class.
Yeah.
But what's overwhelming sometimes are the moments when I have a few more minutes or I'm stopped and it's like this intense outpouring of like
You changed my life.
the breast cancer, the divorces, and some it's not always like a sob story, but they're intense. And I'm in somebody's living room and like over hundreds of thousands of classes, like early mornings, late nights, like there's a parasocial relationship that is super legit.
That's very intimate.
Very. And I am being myself, right? So I have a class plan, I have notes, but I'm me. And every instructor is that, you know, that's who they are, truly. And that's, I think, the special sauce. And that's why it's replicable over thousands of classes, because it's not an act and it's not a script.
Yeah.
And we're not wearing in-ears of somebody saying, hey, next up, say da-da-da-da. We're not scripted. I understand just different production environments, and I have such deep respect for the authenticity of Peloton.
I mean, I do think that it's easy to take for granted how intimate an interaction it really is, and how and we talked with Carolyn Tischblatt when she was here about, you know, it's almost like a Rorschach test of like, all right, who's your instructor? You know, like when you're in, you know, like, and it says something about sort of your personality, or even like the mood that you're in on any given day.
And we all do that. It's like, what mood am I in today?
It's like,
and that's
I mean, I will tell you, I only take your classes when I'm like ready to get my ass kicked. So
run through a wall.
when I need it, this would be a good one
we
for
have
you.
plenty of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. All right, we're gonna do a rapid fire, so it's 10 questions. Just first thing that pops to your mind. Don't need to think about it too hard. All right, I'll start and then Alex will pick up. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
What's one word to describe your deal making style?
Decisive.
What's more important to you, gut or data?
Gut.
Who's your dream deal making partner?
Oh, gosh, there's so many. I would love to work with Dwayne Johnson. I think what he's done at $7 is genius.
And Danny Garcia.
And Danny, of course.
What's the best piece of advice you ever received on deal making or business?
The best advice. It's either yes or a no, thank you.
What's the worst advice you've been given?
Stay in your lane.
What's a deal you wish you had done?
Oh, I don't regret it, but after I left Adidas, I was negotiating with another athletic brand, and the reason I left Adidas is because I really wanted to do a capsule collection or something that had, you know, it was a creative, something that was creatively inspired by myself and the brand, and we were really, really close to signing a deal that would have involved that, but I still felt like the financials weren't there. It was kind of like, we'll throw you a bone, you'll have a capsule collection, but I felt undervalued. And it went a few years without an athletic partner. And then, you know, now having conversations with Noble, it feels like, oh, right, that door closed because it created this one.
What's harder, running an ultra marathon or writing a book?
I think writing a book, because there's so many other players in that process.
This one is going to be a tough one. What is your hype song before you go into a big meeting or negotiation?
I mean, listen, MOP Annie Up was on my labor playlist for the hospital. So clearly I have playlists for everything. If I'm really trying to get into a groove, Beyonce's Homecoming Live performance, like front to back, really inspires me. It's obviously the music is dope, but the symbolism of it, you know, of her being a Black woman headlining Coachella just really inspires me. And then keeping it in the family, Jay-Z's My First Song, it goes to that day one mentality.
Yeah.
And it both pumps me up, but also keeps me grounded, because it's like, it's day one. We're still hustling.
Hustling. This may be the first time you said hustle. I was expecting like hustling throughout this whole thing. You can only watch one sport for the rest of your life. Which one is it?
Watch one. I think it would be track and field, actually. I like love track and field.
If one team can win a championship, which one would that be?
I think my husband might be very upset if I don't say the Jets. Because good God, they need it.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, that's the saddest answer we've had to that question.
I wasn't expecting that.
I was not expecting that one at all. Robin, you continue to surprise on so many levels. What a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
desde o começo eu também não sabia o que fazer. Foi a mais terrível que eu passei na minha vida. Porque no final, tudo é dinheiro.
People back home there, they are suffering. And someone is driving a Range Rover with their money.
Where is my money? I think she's a scam up to now.
Repeat after me. I am a winner.
I didn't know how big it was. I didn't really understand what I was getting myself into.
Tunisha lagi ko
Money can do a lot of good. It can really transform people's lives, but it can also hurt them.
Welcome back to the circuit. This time, we're taking you to the frontier.
Do we have a camera, or do we? We don't want to lose you, Emily, in all of this.
Stargate, put that name down in your books.
What we're undergoing right now is sort of the largest infrastructure build in human history.
To meet the people rewriting the rules of code and culture.
How do you personally grapple with the pace of it all?
It does feel like it's going very fast.
When did you realize, oh my gosh, my life is never going to be the same?
The day I got engaged, I was like, whoa, what have I bitten off here?
Where the future gets real.
How confident are you that AI's promise will outweigh the perils?
I'm not confident.
So the tech companies are lying or fudging.
And a little weird.
What's the point of this?
What is the point of any of this?
Tune into Season 3 of The Circuit with me, Emily Chang. Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Originals and Bloomberg TV.
You don't think the court was hurt by the perception that it was a political decision?
The court's always hurt, it seems to me, if we look political. One of my concerns, my present-day concerns, is there's too much partisanship. It's true historically that most presidents have appointed justices to the Supreme Court who are members of their own party. The partisanship should not be an overriding factor. What you look at is temperament, learning, background, reputation, whether or not you have those qualities of independence and caution that make for a good judge.
Increasingly, you see dissenting opinions in the Supreme Court aren't quite as civil as maybe you might prefer. And is that of concern to you?
Yes, it's of great concern to me that our civil discourse, our civic discourse, is not civil enough. Aristotle said that a democracy depends on an open debate where you respect the dignity of those with whom you disagree. He said democracies only live if they are sustained over a period of time by a thoughtful, rational discourse, a discourse in which you respect the dignity of those with whom you disagree.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives
and laying the foundation for the future.
From finance to defense, AI to entertainment,
and from the road to the stars. Bloomberg brings you the latest stories of the people and companies pushing the tech sector to new frontiers.
and the politics that shape global tech markets.
I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Watch Bloomberg Tech every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg Television. We're at the epicenter of a global realignment on a scale not seen for decades. At the intersection between markets, economics, and geopolitics, a forum for sophisticated conversation. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Bringing you the world's business and financial news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Michael McKee at Mount Everest, and this is Bloomberg.
Chris Cox says playing Dungeons & Dragons taught him a lot about being a CEO.
Being a dungeon master is basically being a collaborative storyteller.
Building worlds as part of a team informed his views on building a company.
I think, being a CEO is equal parts head as well as heart. And when you understand game design, you understand systems that underlie how people behave. And then the hard part of it is how do you tell a good story? How do you get people believing in the mission?
Soon after Cox became CEO of Hasbro, the company that now owns Dungeons & Dragons, he needed to hire a CFO. He decided that person should play not one, but two critical leadership roles.
Were you looking for a joint CFO, COO? Was that already the position?
Yeah, that was ideal.
Cox picked Gina Getter to be his teammate in Hasbro's C-suite. She says heading up operations and finance puts her ahead of the game.
I did tell Kristen, I'm like, when we do these traveling runs, we should figure out who else to go on stage besides just you, Chris, and Holly. I don't see it as two separate roles. Every single decision, every single action that you're taking links back into the financial statements. We are really only working on the things that matter and ultimately lead us to delivering our financial commitments.
Everybody I've talked to about you says you're an operator expert. Is that your role here?
I am not an accountant. I love accountants. I hire fantastic accountants. But I'm a finance person. I gravitated to more of the roles where you're embedded in the business, and it's where I find myself at Hasbro.
You get to the execution phase, and that's really where I think she shines. As both the CFO and the COO, she's really the quarterback on the field, and I'm more the coach on the sidelines.
Cox and Getter have taken on a serious challenge, leading the 100-year-old company into its future. They'll meet it with hard work and partnership.
We've got businesses that are very much in transformation mode, and we have brands and businesses that are very much in turnaround mode. We haven't been doing well and need to find a new path forward. I get energy there.
Gina's like the closest partner I have at the company. She's the architect of our transformation and our turnaround.
When Gina Getter joined Hasbro, the company was hardly at the top of its game. Coming out of the pandemic, consumer products revenue was falling fast, driven by declining toy sales. The stock price was plunging as well. To start a turnaround, Hasbro needed a rethink.
Our costs were too high. Our brands were kind of out of position with where people wanted to play and what people were buying and what demographics were buying.
I think that in our first year working together, we did a lot of heavy lifting to get the bad complexity out. There's always going to be complexity in businesses. It's the bad complexity, though, that we have to shed. We also then took roughly 80% of our SKUs out, just to continue this theme of reducing complexity.
80%?
80%.
Wow.
In February 2025, Hasbro released a 5-point strategic plan called Playing to Win.
We really have to get back to fundamentals. Like, what makes Hasbro great? What is our fundamental superpower? The thing that we can do better than anyone else? And at the ground floor, it's really play.
There's this resurgence of it's okay as an adult to play. That's not necessarily playing with a toy, but all expressions of play. We have so many brands that we played with as a kid that you're now sharing with your own kids. So we definitely are tapping into all elements of that.
The toy consumer has remained really resilient. We see that even in tougher macro environments, parents tend to prioritize their kids, even if they're cutting back on high-ticket items. And from an affordability perspective, more than 70% of the industry is priced at $25 or $30 below. On that affordability spectrum, toys remains an important home entertainment for parents that they lean on in tougher macroeconomic environments.
The Play concept aims to broaden Hasbro's customer base. Now the company is working to focus its portfolio.
We've been pretty overt about here are the businesses that we are going to grow. We are putting a disproportionate amount of human capital, financial capital, our mind time, our focus time on getting those brands and businesses to grow. And then we have a very clear of here are businesses that are just kind of in a sustain mode, and there are other businesses that are in a big need for reinvention. But that clarity internally has allowed us to make easier decisions on where should that next dollar of investment go.
Growth comes from franchises like Magic: The Gathering, Hasbro's first billion-dollar brand. Legacy brands like Nerf are getting a makeover with a new emphasis on play centers and community experiences.
The first step in solving kind of like our Nerf challenges is understanding that not every solution involves a dart.
The answer to fixing Nerf is going to be about the IP itself and getting that IP to resonate back into other areas of play.
The original positioning for Nerf is the world's first indoor ball. And so I think you're going to see our teams really leaning into how can I bring safe, active play, regardless of context, back to life. Some of it will involve darts. Some of it will involve like water-based play, like we've been leaning on over the last several years.
Let's Monopoly go!
Talk about transforming IP. You can now play Monopoly on your phone.
Monopoly is now the biggest mobile game in the world. Monopoly Go has done billions of dollars and hundreds of millions of consumers.
That's just one example of Hasbro's push to be digital and direct, with both classic games and new licensing partnerships.
You need to be relevant outside of the toy aisle, and you cannot be everything to everyone at the same time. So if you have a more sort of franchise building approach to these brands, how do you touch the consumer in different verticals? It's more about how do you have a long-lasting presence in the consumer life.
It is time for you to join the others.
Video games are huge for things like D&D with Baldur's Gate 3 and all the new games we have in development from our own studios.
What about getting your products in media? I mean, getting kids to play Dungeons and Dragons on Stranger Things must have been a huge boon.
We have an entertainment segment that is laser focused on that type of placement of our brands in entertainment. Entertainment continues to be some fuel for our businesses.
Its strategic plan has given Hasbro momentum in a year when U.S. tariff policy has caused headwinds and headaches.
Tariffs, I think, are probably the first time in my career I've had to deal with like a fundamental change in government policy in terms of how we think about how markets work.
In June of 2025, Hasbro laid off 3% of its global workforce as it raised its cost savings target to $1 billion.
The challenge, especially within my supply chain, is now how do you have enough productivity initiatives to offset the increased cost of all the product?
For the industry as a whole, you have more than 80% dependence on China as a sourcing market. For some of the bigger players, that exposure is less, and they have more nimble, more flexible supply chains to navigate this disruption. For the medium-sized and smaller players, this has been very, very disruptive.
Can you just move your supply chain out of China and into the US or out of Mexico and out to Canada? Is it that easy?
It's not that easy, but we do have flexibility. And we had been, prior to tariffs, prior to any of this, we had been on a journey to diversify our footprint out of China. So probably 2-ish years ago, roughly 60-65% of our toy and game volume was coming from China. Today, as we entered into 2025, that was around 50%. All we've done is really accelerate the path to get down to roughly, call it 30% by the time we enter into 2027.
We're growing inside Southeast Asia. Vietnam's a big base for us. India's a fairly big base for us. And then in Eastern Europe and Eurasia, Turkey is a meaningful base for us, and Indonesia is growing for us as well.
For us, I mean, if tariffs stay, if tariffs go, it's never good to have so much of your manufacturing base centered on one geography. We think diversification is good, but it does take a bit of time to get vendors and suppliers up to speed. Quality is a big deal, especially when you're dealing with toys and kids. It's not an instantaneous thing, but it's not also a 5-year, have to build a new plant from scratch.
Coming up, a visit to Wizards of the Coast, where Hasbro's been putting big money into its big push into video games.
We have been investing, roughly call it $100-ish million for the past few years behind all of our video game ventures.
This is Bloomberg.
Morning, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Tom McKenzie in London. These are the stories that set your agenda.
Taking you from the U.S. market's close to the overnight session in Asia, we'll walk you through what you need to know to kickstart Europe's trading day. Live from our European headquarters, we bring you the day's top market-moving stories, unmatched expert analysis, and on-the-ground reporting from across the continent. Tune in to Daybreak Europe, only on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything.
Know how the market day started.
Find out how it finishes.
Public markets to private markets.
From the micro to the macro.
Covering retail, entertainment, the business of sports.
The supply chains, trade policy, how it all is impacting the U.S. equity market as we drive to the closing bell at 4 p.m.
A holistic approach to covering financial markets.
If it matters to your life, we're covering it. I'm Katie Greinfeld.
And I'm Romaine Bostic, and this is The Close.
Live every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Hasbro CFO Gina Getter has spent her entire career working for consumer products companies, starting out in food.
I spent 20 years at General Mills. By the time I had progressed through kind of to my most senior positions at General Mills, I was leading big businesses, around the company, and focused on business operations and kind of soup to nuts re-engineering the business models.
After a short stint at Tyson Foods, she moved into the CFO seat at Harley Davidson.
I imagine at Harley Davidson, it must have been unique to have a woman as CFO, right?
I've had the good fortune in all of the stops I've had along the way where my bosses have prioritized that diversity of thought.
I noticed also that a lot of people who work here seem to also play the games.
Mm-hmm.
They live in this culture.
Yeah.
And that must have been the same at Harley, right?
At Harley, you're right, I wasn't a rider, but I'm from Milwaukee. I learned how to ride, and here at Hasbro, it's the same thing. I mean, I grew up with all of the brands that we have on our toy side of the business. D&D and Magic were new to me, but learning. And the same way that I tried to learn how to ride a Harley, I'm learning how to play Magic. So it's important to me that I can connect with what we're putting out in the world.
Wizards of the Coast, which produces both Dungeons & Dragons and Magic the Gathering, is the growth engine for Hasbro. It's expected to contribute nearly 40% of 2025 sales. I visited Wizards headquarters outside Seattle with Gina Getter to find out what magic Hasbro is casting to drive the success of these games.
This year, we launched Final Fantasy, which is the biggest set ever in Magic's history. I think it was the biggest set ever on day one of the launch. But it's not our IP. We're paying someone for that IP. But what we are getting is an expansion and engagement with our player base. And that Universes Beyond strategy, we have a couple more that we're rolling out here in 25. But as we look into 26 and 27, we also have a nice healthy balance of Universes Beyond sets that are just going to continue to grow and make that Magic ecosystem even healthier than it is today.
Dungeons & Dragons and Magic are aging, while the number of newer tabletop games grows. Keeping both D&D and Magic fresh is important.
How do you weigh the benefit of innovation or newness versus keeping the fan base happy because they must get angry when things change, right?
It is a vocal and healthy fan base. And as we launched into Universes Beyond, there was a bit of this, how are our core players going to respond? And is it going to do the job? Are these Universes Beyond releases going to do the job of engaging the core while at the same time building and kind of attracting new users or new players? Our first one that we did was the Lord of the Rings set back in 2023. And that one was wildly successful as well. And our original hypothesis was it was going to be a lot of new players coming in. But what we saw when we did Lord of the Rings was actually not that. We initially saw our core players engage in the IP. We also saw a lot of lapsed players get re-energized or re-interested in the game. Now that we're probably a year or so removed from that Lord of the Rings launch, and we're watching all of the different KPIs within Magic just continue to grow, we can step back and say that Lord of the Rings launch actually did do that third piece, which was attract new players.
There are currently about 30,000 Magic cards, with more coming as Universes Beyond expands. But even in the age of AI, the designs are being made by humans.
All of the cards that you're looking at here are artist-driven. We are not leveraging AI to make our cards. So that is a place that we have kind of said, no, we are for the artists. that creativity is going to come from humans. We can leverage AI within Magic to speed up processes, but the actual art itself that you're staring at is coming from our artists themselves.
Can you bring it into the actual gameplay?
I think AI is going on the gameplay, whether it's D&D or Magic, will be an enabler, especially like with Magic. It is a complicated game, but now that I know the basics, as I go to play, I am able to leverage AI to help me facilitate my learning. I think that's a very individualized experience. But we know that getting players and attracting new folks in, having them learn how to play is a key element to that. I think that AI is going to be an enabler to help us get those people learning faster.
Hasbro continues to license its IP for video games with Monopoly Go and Baldur's Gate 3 bringing in millions for the company. In 2026, Hasbro is betting big on in-house game development with its expected release of Exodus.
It's a brand new IP. It's set in space. It's kind of D&D in space.
When you bring something all the way in-house, like an Exodus, what kind of numbers are you looking at? What kind of investment is that? What kind of payout do you want to see?
We have been investing, roughly call it $100-ish million for the past few years behind all of our video game ventures, not just Exodus. As we think about Exodus and the launch here, I am just looking for a nice single. We're not trying to shoot for the stars. We're not trying to be, a video game company that is doing 8, 10, 12 million units on a launch. Exodus, we have a lot of learning there too. It's bearing the brunt of a lot of first-time things that you would expect. A lot of first-time infrastructure setups, a lot of learning. As we move forward with the other games in our pipeline, we're able to leverage some of the scale and some of the infrastructure that we had to put in for Exodus. But we've also taken some of the learnings on just how to do the development even better. So Exodus itself is going to crack open the capability for us. The return that we're going to generate is going to be coming from these future games that are in our pipeline.
This is your last chance to bail, June.
Do it.
Coming up, CapEx decisions are never easy, but with tariffs biting into Hasbro's business, Gina Getter's taking even more care with the company's cash.
Most of our capital is being spent on those businesses that aren't exposed to tariffs.
This is Bloomberg.
Bringing you up to them in the news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Sherian in Seoul, and this is Bloomberg.
Do you think the dollar will remain the only reserve currency in the world, or are you as comfortable with the dollar as you used to be?
The dollar has been, as you say, a reserve currency for about 80 years. Actually, if you wanted to go further back, you could say it's almost after World War I, when the US had lent money to Europe and the UK for ammunition and so on, and then they had to get paid back in dollars, and that's when the strength of the dollar really began. So it's 100 years, 80 years, 100 years of dollar strength, so much so that important commodities, gold, oil, are denominated in dollars. Dollars are part of the payment system. When countries talk to each other, they represent their GDP and various figures in dollars. I think undoing that will take a long, long time. And, 3% in foreign exchange terms is not that much.
Okay, so you think the dollar will stay as the reserve currency of the economy?
Absolutely.
Africa, a region rife with potential for growth and opportunities, but not without its challenges. Bloomberg highlights the biggest stories, interviewing key players, and reporting on the issues impacting the region. Join us as we get to the heart of African business, politics, and economics, and ask the question, what's next? I'm Jennifer Zabasaja, and this is Next Africa. New episodes every month, only on Bloomberg.
What is going to be the consequence for U.S. markets? We are seeing money skates across European equity markets.
Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Stephen Engel at Japan's Akasaka Palace in Tokyo, and this is Bloomberg.
With a new strategic plan setting its path forward, Hasbro's leadership feels optimistic that the company is moving in the right direction. It's also preparing to move its headquarters from Pawtucket, Rhode Island to Boston's Seaport District. As both COO and CFO, Gina Getter will face plenty of decisions. Wall Street expects the company's CapEx spend to reach new highs in the coming year.
Where is it most important to you to put money to work?
Most of our capital is being spent on those businesses that aren't exposed to tariffs. So whether that's investing in Magic and making sure that that business continues to grow, we're spending a lot of our capital on these new video games that our first one is set to launch next year. The next pool of dollars is going to our transformation. We would put them in terms of their no regret decisions.
Hasbro's focus on its asset-light licensing business has bolstered the company's bottom line. Leveraging its license of IP provides a low-risk, high-margin reward for the balance sheet.
Because I noticed you have so many licensing agreements and so many businesses where you're making like 50% margins.
We like our licensing business. So we've been in an asset-light model for a while, and we define that as we don't own our own manufacturing. We are actively pursuing any license that plays with the categories where we compete and that we have the expertise to win, because that just comes with some nice scale on the top line. And as you said, it's extremely profitable.
Licensing has become a big part of the industry. If you look at it globally today, about 35% of toy retail sales are licensed product. In the US, that percentage is slightly higher. Importance of IP becomes paramount because ultimately who owns the brand will direct how that brand is presented to the consumer. So that space has become increasingly competitive.
Does the IP and the partnership business, do you think that becomes a segment that's bigger than Magic and D&D?
Gosh, that would be fantastic because that's basically pure profit. No, I don't think it becomes bigger than Magic and D&D. I think on a profit basis, no, but on a reaching consumers and total merchandise dollars, it's already much bigger.
In 2019, Hasbro expanded into entertainment, taking on significant debt to buy Canadian production company E1 for $4 billion. That deal didn't pay off. In 2023, Hasbro sold E1 to Lionsgate for only $500 million.
Let's talk about the debt that you have. I think it's $3 billion.
A little over three, yes.
What's a level where you feel comfortable? Where do you want to get that?
We've said that we'd like to get ourselves in that, call it 2.5 leverage ratio. If I had to peg an absolute number, we're probably carrying about $1 billion too much.
In spite of tariff headwinds and a softening of consumer confidence, Hasbro's stock has been gaining ground. While investing in the business and paying down debt has been a priority, the company has continued to pay a dividend.
When you talk to investors, what do they tell you? What is the message they're giving you?
Depends on the investor. Definitely, I think, returning cash to shareholders is something that they think is very important. A lot of them like the dividend. A lot of them would like us to, see us think about other ways that we can give cash back, like stock buybacks. I think they really like the licensing business and are waking up to what a gem that is for us.
Whatever moves Hasbro makes going forward, Gina Getter will play an important role in seeing them through. I asked her what she sees when she looks ahead.
What's the opportunity for Hasbro over the next decade that excites you most?
I would say everything that we're doing in the gaming space. So while it is riskier than probably launching another toy or another Magic set, where we're headed on the broad definition of gaming is super exciting. I think that is going to be the single biggest unlock for our company, moving us away from being just Hasbro as a toy company to Hasbro as a play and we're a game company.
What's the biggest challenge for Hasbro over the next decade that keeps you up at night?
I would say the next few years, it's going to be navigating through the macro environment and getting our toy business on solid footing from a profitability standpoint. I think we've done a lot of good things in terms of reinvigorating innovation and getting our brands positioned well, but we need to be doing all of that in a lens of we're making money on that business. So I think the next few years is making sure that we're settled there and we've got a sustainable business model.
What's the skill set or area of knowledge that you would advise every aspiring CFO to develop or work on?
I will speak from my experience as I stepped into Harley because I was a first-time CFO. I spent a lot of time figuring out how to take the complex and make it simple and be able to understand how all of the numbers came together, the business model, what was driving the actual math, and then finding a way to be able to communicate that both internally and externally. Spending a lot of time with your investor base, listening, but really making sure that that simple and clear, transparent story is understood and embedded.
Complete this sentence. The hardest part of being a CFO is?
The hardest part of being a CFO in a creative company with a gazillion ideas every single day is making the trade-offs and telling our creatives that it's a good idea, but it's not the idea that we're going to fund, or we're going to do it, but we're going to do it a little bit differently than what you had envisioned. So I think saying no is probably the hardest part. We have the blessing of a lot of creatives, a lot of good ideas, but some just aren't fitting with our long-term strategy.
A friend calls you up and says, I've got great news. I've been promoted to CFO. After you say congratulations, what's the first piece of advice you would give that person?
I would say make sure that you have a very good self-awareness of where your strengths are and where your gaps are, and make sure where you've got your gaps, you are hiring into your gaps. So I think as you're stepping in, especially the first time CFO, it's going to be unrealistic that you will have every box checked on what it takes to be a really good CFO. To know where your gaps are, hire into them, and immerse.
I'm Matt Miller. This is Bloomberg.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute news.
Geopolitical news.
Economic news.
Up-to-the-minute global news.
Whenever, and wherever.
Wherever it happens.
In Washington.
Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Sintra, Portugal.
Ottawa, Canada.
Bangkok.
Tehran.
Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Windsor Castle, England.
The Circuit de la Sarthe in Le Mans.
And this.
And this.
And this is Bloomberg.
When I visited Fernandez at IMAX's headquarters outside Toronto, we went to the facility where IMAX designs and maintains its cameras. The latest next-gen equipment was out with directors on filmed for IMAX sets, but there was still plenty of cool gear on view.
As the head of the finance department, do you look at all the things in this room and think, this costs that amount of money, this costs that amount of money?
Thankfully, no. I don't. When I think about cameras in general and what we, when we first, I'll give you a really prime example, the film cameras. When you thought about it, okay, are we building 2? Are we building 4? Are you building 8, right? And that's where I start to think about, well, what makes the most sense from a return perspective? Because yes, Nolan wants the cameras, but how many other filmmakers out there use the film cameras? The lens that I look at it through is essentially, how many do we build and in what way? Because the one thing is we are going to invest to build it right and to build it for longevity. But do you need 10 of them? No. Building 4, that was the right number. And do we potentially want to build a couple more? Maybe a couple more, but I don't think we need 10 because they won't always be in use all the time.
I imagine that at different points you need to tell people no. What's that process like for you?
Oh yeah, it's a key role in the CFO position. It is a word that most people are used to, and yet they still think you're not going to say it.
U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers Jobs Day like Bloomberg.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories. I'm Sarah Lian in Tokyo.
And I'm Heidi Stradwatts here in Sydney where the trading day begins. We're here in the center of all the action to get you set up with the numbers, news and knowledge you need for the day ahead.
The demand is indeed recovering. We've been waiting for this moment.
The opportunity of the century.
Join us on Bloomberg The Asia Trade. Weekdays only on Bloomberg TV. Context changes everything.
It's the world's second largest economy with a growing influence in global affairs. Bloomberg The China Show brings you the unmatched expertise you need to keep track of breaking news, in-depth market analysis, and the most influential newsmakers in and around China.
We need to do more to engage the market more. We're risk on. I think we caught a little sweet spot.
Massive savings right now.
It's already a different game.
Bloomberg The China Show. Weekdays around the world, right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
There's so much disruption in politics, in trade, in blockchain, in AI. How do you think we'll reflect on this period?
I have to tell you that in my 30 plus years in this business, I have never felt the intense pressure of change like we do right now. From an investment person, staying on top of all these things has always been core to what they do.
All right. Okay. Gosh, it's like Hogwarts.
It's like Hogwarts.
Thank you so much. Wow. It's quite impressive being in such a big hall. I feel
know.
Like,
Very
the weight
important.
of history.
Yes.
Jenny, thank you so much for doing Leaders with us.
I am honored to be here.
So let's start from the beginning. How would you describe your family?
Wow, that's just diving right in.
Let's go in.
How would I describe my family? Look, I think bunch of achievers. You know, you look at my dad, he really built Franklin Templeton. People always say my grandfather started it, but my dad took it over when it was $2.5 million in assets and $10,000 in revenue.
Founded in 1947 and named in honor of Benjamin Franklin, Franklin Templeton began as a pioneering investment firm dedicated to giving everyday investors access to professional money management. Franklin Templeton operates in more than 80 financial centers worldwide: London, New York, Paris, and Hong Kong, to name a few, but is headquartered in California. Today, it manages around $1.6 trillion in assets. They surpassed the $1 trillion mark after Jenny Johnson took the reins. Johnson held leadership roles in all Franklin Templeton's major divisions. She's a third-generation heir to this chief executive role. And her family owns more than a third of the business. What's it really like to lead the company your family started and grew for generations?
There was never any pressure to go into the business. You went into, we all did at some point because somebody, probably needed a job, but there was never pressure to head that way. And then my mom had 7 children and went back to, college and graduated from Stanford Medical School and then practiced. Dinner was always 7 o'clock sharp, and you needed to have shoes and a shirt and be reasonably nicely dressed for dinner. That was always, and the whole family sat down. The conversations, I would say, were much more oriented towards science, my mother's sort of area of interest, than finance. My dad, he's probably a little quieter than my mom, and the conversations, again, you never felt any pressure.
So Jen, what was the interview process like to becoming chief executive?
So it was not a fait accompli.
Okay.
So the board, look,
That's tough if you're like part of a family.
Oh, trust me. They put me through a Spencer Stuart CEO survey, and they said, we're going to give you a scenario, and you need to answer it. And the only reason I remember this one, I don't remember any other, is because my mind went completely blank with fear. So you own a parking garage, and your clients are complaining that it takes too long to exit at the same time, and you've hired 2 consultants, and they've said you cannot speed up the exit process, and you can't add an exit. What do you do?
What'd you do? You I don't know, you tier it so that the one who pays more gets out first. I'm not sure. I'd fail 100%.
I just remember because it was such fear, and so then I said, well, first thing is I'm gonna do a quick study to see how many other parking lots around to see how quickly I have to solve the problem. And what's the demand, and then I'm gonna study as to why, and then I'm gonna do tiered pricing. Yes.
But so who chose in the end? Was it like a family process voting? I mean, it feels like quite scary, a bit like Succession.
It's the board. No, it's the board, right? And the board has a fiduciary duty to all shareholders.
What was your first week like?
Oh, well, we announced 5 days after I became CEO the acquisition of Legg Mason.
This will be an interesting mix of institutional and retail clients. Can they do both well?
Can they?
To be seen.
And then 2 weeks later, we had a 2-week lockdown to flatten the curve for COVID that turned into the 2-year lockdown. At one time, I was going through a tough situation at work, and my father left on my desk. It was a little printout of a cartoon, and the cartoon was a frog being swallowed by a duck. But the frog had managed to get its arm around and was squeezing the neck of the duck, so the duck couldn't quite get it down, and it said, never give up.
Is your dad your biggest influence in life?
I'd say both my parents are, because I work, to this day, my dad is 92 years old and will circle the footnote of something and send me a note on it. He did every job in the company, and so I'm always amazed by the breadth of his understanding.
Jenny, take us through Franklin Templeton today. It's a different company today than it was 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, so we're now $1.6 trillion asset manager. What hasn't changed is we've been very global for a long time. We have clients in 160 countries. But we used to be just traditional asset management. Now we're half institutional, half wealth channel. And we are a top 10 alternatives manager. So we've got, secondary private equity, real estate, private credit, venture. So we've had to evolve as the business has evolved.
An asset manager is a company that manages other people's money, grows and protects their wealth. Asset managers decide where to put the money: bonds, stocks, real estate, private equity, or other investments. And this money belongs to individuals, other companies, pension funds, or even governments. Under Jenny Johnson's leadership, Franklin Templeton bet on a few new products like blockchain technology and alternative investments like private markets. Private markets are a growing part of the economy. Here's why they matter. The name says it all. Public markets, think the New York Stock Exchange, are open to everyone and anyone can see how a company is doing. In private markets, which started booming in the 1980s, investments happen behind closed doors, so you don't really know how that company is doing from the outside. They can be risky, but they promise higher returns. Private markets are mostly for institutions, including pension funds and insurance companies, as well as very wealthy individuals. Investors are expected to do their own research, and their money could be tied up in the company for years. Private credit, which soared after banks tightened their lending following the 2008 financial crisis, is also an increasingly big part of private markets today. Private markets, including both private equity and private credit, are expected to continue growing globally, from $13 trillion in 2024 to more than $20 trillion by 2030. But they're also looser when it comes to regulations and transparency. Franklin Templeton, with other private market players, wants to lower the bar for participating in the sector, expanding access to retail customers even. Because the thing is, private markets are where lots of money can be made, where wealth gaps widen. According to Franklin Templeton, democratizing them could tighten the gap between the haves and the have-nots. But also, lowering the bar may bring in more money. And all players in private markets today are running an assets under management race. They need to grow bigger and bigger to survive. The market essentially is becoming increasingly concentrated in the larger players.
It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, only on Bloomberg. Tune in to Bloomberg Business Week Daily.
We gotta talk crypto.
From the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead.
What's the conversation around your company?
Bringing you insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy.
Planning very big things.
The new level of premium.
Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens.
The floodgates of innovation are going to open up.
You can't fake passion. You either are or you aren't.
Bloomberg Business Week Daily, only on Bloomberg.
The US, I guess, was built on wealth creation. And then since the global financial crisis, access to money or investing has changed. What's your vision for wealth creation?
I think the first thing is obviously this growth in private markets. And I think that's a secular change. Banks aren't going to suddenly get back into the kind of lending like they used to do. That is going to be done, a big portion of it, by private credit managers. And so for us to bring to our clients, we have both traditional fixed income and private credit. The second thing is, which I think is important, is providing access and customization to individuals.
So do you think, is it unfair? Do you really think it's the only way for wealth creation to happen and I guess to close that gap between the have and the have-nots?
Well, first of all, I do think there's a narrative that is not fair, that we as an industry have perpetuated, where we need to define what we do in such a way that we are actually helping people with the most important goals of their lives, right? Like, you know, usually there, as part of a goal, not always, but most of the time there's a financial component, and helping people achieve that. Having that nest egg of savings is really important. And so I think one is we have a duty to think about bringing products that are appropriate risk for people's, wherever they are, kind of on their risk profile. And now it's about, well, how do you provide access to everybody? I always say my grandfather got into this business because the average person couldn't get access to the equity markets. So they created a mutual fund because it gave you diversification, expert experience for a small amount.
Anyone who has an insurance policy, a bank deposit, or a share of stock is helping to finance our business system. A constant stream of savings dollars must flow into big and small business each year.
Well, now we face a similar issue with private markets because they're becoming so significant. You have half the number of public companies, you know, than you did 2 decades ago. So how do you give everybody access? But it's an asset class that is completely illiquid. And most people don't have the luxury of tying up their savings for a long time. And so thinking about creative vehicles to do that, I think, is really important.
But I mean, some say this is reckless because actually there's too much risk in some of the private markets, even some of the, you know, private credit. And so how do you make sure it's safe whilst at the same time generates money?
Any credit can be very risky or not. Silicon Valley Bank showed that the US Treasuries were risky because duration is an important component of risk in fixed income. And so that's what I mean by thinking about risk as you, and how you align that risk with whatever those clients' needs are. So as you look to democratize access to private markets, we have to be really cognizant. And I always say that it's the most important thing is the tip of the spear. We're big believers in the financial advisor being the person who's making that decision along with their client. People ask me, because we've done 10 acquisitions since I've become CEO, and they say, well, how do you make sure that the culture fits? And so I often say, well, if you're evaluating a company, clients first. My dad always says, take care of the client, the business takes care of itself. The second is, do they show that they're collaborative amongst each other, right? Do they seem to get along? Are they open and willing? Because what can go wrong in an acquisition is that there's an attitude of, we're separate, we're not going to participate. So you need people who will collaborate.
But how do you know? Because there's so many acquisitions, you know, it could be big banks where actually the culture didn't fit. And you speak to chief executives and said, well, I did the due diligence and it just wasn't a good match. Like, how do you make sure that the culture fits, that the leadership is good at the companies you buy?
I think it's meeting the people and spending time with them at the beginning. And then also, our approach in acquisitions has always been, we're not going to cram down things, right? Because if you're in the asset management business, you are buying people and investment process. So don't destroy value by suddenly going in and changing that. And now you show them why actually being part of the bigger firm is better for them. So how does that come up, right? One is obviously from our breadth of distribution. We have clients in 160 countries. But things like AI, and I think that's actually a big issue going forward for asset managers. If you're a boutique manager, you're not going to be able to compete with the amount of data. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars on buying data.
But still, it's risky, right? Buying companies is risky. Have you ever shied away from risk, or is this, you know, to succeed, you have to be risky?
I think that, well, believe me, there are plenty of companies we didn't acquire. I mean, I always say investment bankers will tell you why it's a great price and a great strategic fit, but they'll never talk about culture. It really matters.
Does Jenny Johnson have a financial advisor? Sounds
Yes, I
like
do.
a nightmare job.
Yeah, yes. Because you have to deal with me.
because you actually know a lot about it.
No, look, I'm a big believer that your financial management of your money is not a part-time job. So I'm a big believer that I just hand it over to that financial advisor and have them take care of it so I don't have to think about it.
But do you need a human financial advisor, or do you just go to AI?
Look, I think I prefer humans, and most people you'll find actually when they get enough money, people say it's like 3 times of their salary, they start to like a financial advisor because it's not part-time. Financial advisors will leverage, you know, the robo kind of capabilities to help them better customize for clients. But you know what? I'm a big believer because I think that, you know, if an 18-year-old can put $100 away for a year, getting in the market, and the way for them to get access to that is through a passive fractional share robo-advisor. That's great. That's better than nothing.
Have you ever thought about, or would you make a movie for a streaming service? Would you make a Netflix movie?
Man, that's a great question.
I mean, I'm waiting for one where I ask and you go, that was a shitty question.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you're good at your job, bro. Like, this is actually the first time anybody's ever asked me that. You know, I'm not here to say what I would and wouldn't do in the future. You know, but the theatrical experience is one that means a great deal to me. It means a great deal to us. Mm-hmm. I feel a certain responsibility. Like if Fruitvale had happened a calendar year later, it probably would have come out on streaming. You know, I've been fortunate enough that everything that I've written and directed has been a theatrical release. So I feel a duty to try to protect that. You know, but that's where I'm at today.
From the beating heart of global finance, economics, and politics, and wherever newsmakers are moving markets, Bloomberg brings you conversations that allow for deep discussions and important insights. What do you think the future is for inflation? Is this new normal? Are markets too optimistic? How do you worry about the things that are outside your control? How does the current fighting completely stop? I'm Francine Lacqua, and this is The Pulse, every weekday only on Bloomberg.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade. Watch Bloomberg Tech. This is the Asia Trade.
This is Wall Street Week. Welcome to Balance of Power.
This is Bloomberg Television.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute global news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Jemana Bersachi in Beirut, and this is Bloomberg.
AI in the workplace is a key topic and sometimes a concern. Artificial intelligence has already cost workers their jobs, disrupted some workflows, and automated others.
The threat of generative artificial intelligence is very real. It doesn't necessarily mean that a robot's going to write an Academy Award-winning script, but it will devalue our members' work.
Leading AI tech chief executives preach its benefits, even encourage us to use it.
When the calculator came out, math teachers at the time apparently said, this is a disaster. This is the end of math education. Why bother teaching anyone math? Like this is, you know, these kids are never gonna learn. And of course what happened is with better tools, we use our brain power for something else.
It's not that we will be replaced by AI in our roles, but we can be replaced by someone who's using AI, who's getting that operating leverage if we're not.
You like create things that take away 90% of the work, and that leads you to want more people, not less.
Then there's the other side of the coin. Dario Amodei, who founded and runs Anthropic, seemingly goes against his own interest when he says AI could wipe out 50% of all entry-level white-collar jobs in the next 1 to 5 years, causing 10 to 20% unemployment across the globe.
It's bigger and it's broader and it's moving faster than anything has before. Learn to use AI, learn to understand where the technology is going. If you're not blindsided, you have a much better chance of adapting.
Geoffrey Hinton, often cited as a godfather of AI, offered the strongest caution as he accepted the Nobel Prize for his foundational discoveries that enabled today's artificial intelligence.
We have no idea whether we can stay in control. But we now have evidence that if they are created by companies motivated by short-term profits, our safety will not be the top priority. They are no longer science fiction.
So what does a future with man and machine working together actually look like?
is ready.
It's one employee, right? And so the idea that he's going to be there, going to continue to work, fill all those shifts, the economics start to make sense.
Every industry and every person in practically every job will contend with this change and the pace of it.
AI is here, and it is not going away, and it has already made a significant impact
across the financial system. In capital markets, firms are using AI to analyze massive volumes of data in real time, from trading patterns to financial disclosures, to guide investment decisions, execute trades more efficiently, and reduce costs.
How do you see AI disrupting actually financial services?
Yeah, so, I think this is faster than even I thought it was coming. So there's the obvious efficiencies in back office so that you can drive down the cost of your products, right? AI is going to be important there. Every big financial institution spends a lot of money on reconciliation between systems and reconciling data. AI will help with that. I might want to say, what are tariffs going to do? How do they affect US pharmaceutical companies versus European pharmaceutical companies? Give me some, perspective on this. It's a theme. It crosses over a lot of things. It goes through all of your research reports internally. It can consume data from all your sell-side reports, and it starts to come back with a theme. And then you can start to engage with that. It's going to have agentic AI. It already does because we have a first development of it, where it'll go out and kind of learn itself and say, hey, is this interesting data for you, right? And so if you can do that well, such that that advisor says, I love meeting with Franklin Templeton because those meetings are so valuable to me, that's going to be a win. And then same thing on the investment process. It's just going to make them much more efficient and effective.
But then most firms will actually have the same models. So what makes the difference between the ones that win and the ones that don't?
I actually don't think most firms will have the same models. I think that firms will leverage things like OpenAI and start to customize, but training the model is going to be all about your own data. That's why one of the first things you do when you're building out AI is you immediately fence off your own data. But what gets really interesting is that the AI leveraging as a tool by your entire talent force is going to be what the future is. Now, I'm really optimistic about things like blockchain as being able to allow us to deliver the same kind of investment expertise at a more cost-effective price.
At its core, blockchain is a digital ledger, a record book that isn't held by one single entity, but shared across a multitude of computers at once. Every new transaction is grouped into a block secured to the one before it, creating a chain that cannot be altered without breaking it. The result is a transparent, tamper-resistant system for tracking ownership and transfers.
Digital assets, over time, you're going to stop talking about them as a separate thing. Way back when I ran at Franklin, we were launching our internet group. Everything to do with the internet was under me. Now you can't imagine thinking of that as a separate group. I think the same thing's going to happen in digital assets. Today, it's kind of been a separate thing. It's going to naturally converge.
The blockchain does hold promise in theory, but skeptics point out that any financial system that grows in popularity will eventually start to look a lot like traditional systems, even if it's on the blockchain. Jane, talk to me about politics and business. So it feels like we've entered a new phase in the US and maybe around the world where business and politics have gotten a lot closer. Do you see any dangers?
Look, the interesting thing is every business has to run regardless of who's in the political office. I'm always interested where people will say, oh, they're trying to drive this party or that party. Actually, most businesses try to stay right in the middle so that they don't ever get on the adverse side of one party or the other. There's definitely lobbying that happens for individual interests of things. I mean, you try as a CEO not to actually lean one way or the other and try to stay very middle of the road. And you have shareholders on both sides, you have clients on both sides.
But politics is changing, right? Because if you have an administration that forces you to choose sides, or forces, even on the trade perspective to choose sides, how do you deal with it?
Look, we're an investment firm, right? So volatility is actually good for active managers. And so in this period, like I said, you finally saw active managers starting to outperform. Our job is actually, and particularly in times of uncertainty, that's when people realize that managing their money is not a part-time job. So from an investment person, staying on top of all these things has always been core to what they do.
Jenny, how do you think about succession? So how, do your kids want to go into the business?
So of my five, one has gone into the business, and I have two nephews that are also in the business. We are a public company, and so there's no right for Annie Johnson to be the future. There wasn't a right for me to be in that role, which is why the board put me through that process. I would not want any Johnson member who doesn't love this business to even be considered. And I think there are 3 of the next generation that seem to love it, but they certainly don't have any right versus anybody else. I think a job of a CEO is succession, right? That if you leave and you haven't put the right person in place, you kind of failed. And there's plenty of examples of iconic CEOs who didn't turn it over to the right person after, didn't groom that right person. So look, I still plan to be here for a lot longer, but I definitely think about part of my job will be to find that next person to be the successor.
And what advice would you give them today?
Make sure that you surround yourself with the right people and put them in the right places. Again, love what you do. If this is not the thing that you wake up every day and love what you do, this is not going to be the right job for you because you're going to spend way too much time doing it. And then showing that resilience, that persistence.
Jenny, thank you.
Thank you.
What some of these generative AI models look like they're going to do is they're going to reduce the cost of producing content to basically zero. So that will be a multiplier effect on the things that we're already seeing, which is that there's more people producing more content and reaching more people, and there's a lot of good and bad that comes downstream from that.
I don't know if you can break down what the average person is seeing right now in terms of stuff that's AI generated versus maybe more traditional human generated, but what's that going to look like in a year or in 5 years?
There's actually a lot of hybrid content, and too often we talk about synthetic content and organic content and never the two shall meet. But there's a lot of content where AI is part of the workflow, right? Like you might not even know it. It might be whatever app you're using to do color correction might be using models to do so. Stamp tool in Photoshop in the old days to get rid of a pimple, those types of things. But that line is going to be more and more blurred. So it's going to be a little bit less like what is organic content and what is AI synthetic content and what the percentages are. I think there's going to be actually more in the middle than pure synthetic content for a while. But you will also see experiences that are purely AI, right? You've seen this in the last 2 weeks with Vibes in the Meta AI app and with Sora 2 from OpenAI. So I think you're going to see both.
The belief for climate change is going down right now. It's going down. And we've tried everything to shame people and blame people and put them in their place and tell them that they're doing things wrong and that they're killing everybody. But if we keep telling them that, then we are going to kill everybody. So we got to figure this out. And we're not going to do it by blaming people who are just trying to wake up and make ends meet every day, especially when a lot of those people have the same connection to nature and the environment that we all share here. I hike and I ski and I love the environment just as much as anybody else. But so does somebody who works in an oil field. The Cabela shopper and the REI shopper want the same things. They want clean air and they want clean water and they want to be able to recreate outdoors. So until we figure out how to get on the same page, we will continue to lose. We cannot afford to lose anymore. We need to build a winning coalition of people across the political spectrum, or we will never create the solutions that we need.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories.
The economy has been doing well. That does not tell you what the future is going to be.
We are taking a step-by-step approach, a very systematic approach with India.
This is a time to put a little more defense into your portfolio.
Insight with Haslinda Anand, only on Bloomberg.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute political news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Tyler Kendall in Washington, and this is Bloomberg.
The stakes are becoming ever higher in the global AI race. Companies spending vast sums on deals of all kinds, including data centers and people. The biggest brains in the field can now reportedly command pay packages of up to $200 million. Leading AI for one of the biggest companies of all, Microsoft, is Mustafa Suleyman. He's now trying to give Microsoft's AI autonomous capability. And he's also thinking about the next frontier, which he says is super intelligence. You'll hear him explain all of that to me. But as ever, on the Mishal Hussain Show, this conversation is about the person as well as the work. Mustafa Suleyman, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Michelle.
I'd love to start by getting your insight into a world which is your everyday world, but which is still developing for most of us, and to understand what are the uses of AI that are in your life that the rest of us might not be using yet?
It's funny you ask, because yesterday night I stayed up far too late watching a film, and afterwards I added to a table that I've made in Copilot, which basically records all the films that I love, films that I want to watch, lists them by date, describes what they were about. I add my personal notes to it, gives me a link to the film poster, and I can keep just saying, okay, now add this film that I want to watch, what would be a similar one that I want to watch. So just like you might ask an assistant to organize your life. And I think that people will be surprised, like the more obscure, the more creative, the more challenging you think the task is that you're going to ask, your AI or Copilot, the better.
But have you used it to do autonomous tasks? So, for example, has it booked tickets for you or bought a gift for you? Because I know this is one of the promises of Copilot. It's just not available in my region, so I haven't been able to try it out for myself yet.
We're still experimenting with it. It can do it. It doesn't always get it right. So it's in like a sort of dev mode. So it's not like generally available just yet. But when it does work, it is the most magical thing you've ever seen.
What are the mistakes it's made that have created problems for you, or the presence of the wrong person?
Well, they can buy the wrong thing, but obviously you can intervene, and it will always ask you permission before it takes the next action and stuff. So it's quite safe. It's a funny thing, technology. It's still magical and amazing, but it's always just got a little bit further to go. And I think in this case, it's a while yet before it's every day.
And I guess that given everything you've seen, you're one of the founders of DeepMind, and you've worked at Google and had your own AI company, Inflection, before you came to Microsoft. Does that mean that when you see these hiccups or these stages of development, you have faith, you don't get frustrated? Because you remember the moment when, back in 2016, when your AI model beat the world champion at Go, which was a huge moment for AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm very stoic about these things. Like, I know that it's going to work in the next 6 months or 12 months, or maybe the worst case 18 months. But, I think we've got a pretty good rhythm now of picking things which are not too far away, but are genuinely transformative. And also, it's important to remember how magical it is today. It can generate images, it can generate videos. I mean, it is already, sort of superhuman magical. And I think I'm just one of those people that's still inspired by what it can do at any given moment.
By this time next year, can I be buying my Christmas presents using an autonomous AI agent?
Yeah, I'm pretty certain that you will be. Yeah, I think it's highly, highly likely.
So speaking of magical things, the recent announcement that you made at Microsoft about superintelligence, that's a term which has really crept into the public debate thanks to you and others in the last few months. When you use the term superintelligence, what does it mean to you?
I mean, superintelligence in the industry today means an AI system that can learn any new task and perform better than all humans combined at all tasks. So it is a very high bar, and at the moment, it comes with a great deal of risk. It is not clear, in fact, it's very uncertain how we would contain and so limit its capabilities and align, so get a system like that to care a lot about humans and want us to succeed and flourish. It's very unclear how we would contain and align a system that is so much more powerful than us. And so the framing that I prefer is one of a humanist superintelligence, one that is always in our corner, on our team, aligned to human interests, and until we can prove that it will remain safe, we won't continue to develop a system that has the potential to run away from us and to get out of the box. And I think that that's an obvious thing to say. Like, that feels like, you know, a statement of fact. Like, everybody should agree to that. And yet, you know, I think it's kind of a novel position in the industry at the moment.
So is that how you're trying to set Microsoft apart? A lot of people are working on superintelligence. Are you trying to make Microsoft distinctive by saying we will always use it through a humanist lens?
Yes, that is our position. You know, Microsoft is a company that's been around for 50 years. It is very careful, it's highly trusted. 90% of the S&P 500 use us to provide email and operating systems and everyday productivity tools, which are now among the best in the world with Copilot. And, you know, I think that we've got that reputation because the company's been careful, and we're going to continue to be careful. And setting out a vision of humanist superintelligence is part of that program.
So what does that mean for your rivals in that field? Some of whom you work closely with, like OpenAI, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. But does it mean that they're the Wild West and you're the moral ones?
I think that everybody has to decide what they stand for and how they operate. And I don't want to judge how they're operating. Right now, I don't see any evidence of large-scale mass harm. I don't see any indication that these things are improving themselves or operating autonomously. But we all predict a time in the next 5 years, maybe in the next 10 years, where these capabilities do start to emerge, and systems like this could set their own goals, or they could improve their own code, or they could act autonomously. Those things are, you know, sort of capabilities that I've clearly outlined as increasing the level of risk, and therefore we have to approach them with caution, with more transparency and audit, with more government engagement, and make proactive declarations about how close we are to those three capabilities. I think that's obvious.
And does that mean that you won't be releasing a superintelligence tool until you're confident that it can be controlled?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think for sure. That's the discussion that we're trying to push now and require everybody to ask themselves in the industry, you know, are they building a humanist superintelligence? Does it really stand for people and for our species first?
I'm just wondering how much confidence we can really have in that, given that things do go wrong. And I don't just mean AI, I mean humans do wrong things, or things just go wrong for other reasons. And the recent example that Microsoft had to deal with was having to cease and disable some services that were being used by the Israeli Ministry of Defense after reporting by The Guardian that suggested they could be being used for mass surveillance.
That was very good reporting by The Guardian. We were very grateful for it. And as soon as we became aware of it, we actually made all the necessary changes, removed the IDF from those servers. And I think, you know, they were clearly not in compliance with our terms of service. And there's an ongoing investigation internally.
But I guess the broader point is that it's hard to have confidence of controls and checks and balances and uses.
It is hard. I mean, these are huge and complicated systems. They carry a lot of risk. And the most that we can do is make sure that we're auditing them and we're removing actors that violate our terms of service as quickly as possible. It is inevitable that at some point over the next 20 or 30 years, machines are going to be more capable than humans at doing most work. And that might come much sooner. And so we have to decide as a society what our purpose is.
right, okay, ready?
David, what initially sparked your interest in this topic of longevity?
15 years ago, I turned 60, and I began to wonder how much longer I'm likely to live and what I could do to extend my life. On longevity, I talked with the leading experts in science and medicine to educate people about how they might be able to change their conduct so that they can live a happier and healthier life. I'm David Rubenstein. Join me on a 4-part journey as I explore the great quest for longevity, only on Bloomberg.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Alim, only on Bloomberg.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geoeconomic news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Bonnie Quinn in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and this is Bloomberg.
So are the first uses of superintelligence going to be in the medical field?
I think so. I think that this is probably the most exciting application of superintelligence. I think we now have systems that can diagnose any rare condition that is found in the literature significantly better than human performance, and do so with fewer tests and interventions. And that's the key thing. It's like often it's actually quite expensive to run, medical intervention tests before you get to a diagnosis, and often they can be unnecessary too, and they take time. And then in that process, the condition can often worsen. In our case, our system does this significantly more cheaply with fewer tests and with higher accuracy. We're just putting it through independent peer review at the moment, and soon there'll be clinical trials of it too. So I think this is very, very, very exciting.
And did you push for that focus yourself? Because you've been running Microsoft AI for a while, about 18 months now. Superintelligence was a big recent announcement. And I'm conscious as I hear you talk about it, that your mother was a nurse, and you, unusually for senior people in tech, you've worked in the public sector as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is an area that's very important to me. Obviously, my mum was an NHS nurse, and I'm just a big believer that technology is here to serve us. Like, it should, make our lives better, should make us more comfortable. One day I think it is going to help us to live longer. I think it's going to, give us the option to work less if we choose to. I do think it's going to produce abundance, and I think that we have to make conscious decisions to use it for those applications first. And that's why, even back at DeepMind, I ran our health unit, and, I'm very passionate about this.
Abundance is such a big promise. Tell me what you mean by it, because most of the time we hear about AI destroying jobs, but are you saying that the work will be done by AI increasingly, and therefore we humans won't have to work as much?
I think that it is inevitable that at some point over the next 20 or 30 years, machines are going to be more capable than humans at doing most work. And that might come much sooner. And so we have to decide as a society what our purpose is, and we have to be very thoughtful about the rate of introduction of new machines. Because we have to make sure that that rate of displacement is counterbalanced with a mechanism to fund people and to support people through a massive transition, for which there is probably not going to be other jobs on the other side that are more competitive than what a machine can do. And so this is a real big step change in what it is to organize society.
Tell me more about where these ideas and your beliefs came from or come from. Your mother was a nurse, but the family you grew up in London in the 1980s and 1990s, how would you describe it?
Pretty working class. Yeah, my dad was a minicab driver. My mum works in NHS. And yeah, I mean, we were, fairly regular, kind of unremarkable. My parents didn't super value education stuff. They always thought I should go get a trade. And my mum would often say to me, you should be a carpenter or electrician, leave school at 16 and stuff. And so I don't know. It comes from a place of just experiencing, the kind of rougher end of things a little bit, and then having just a desire to try to do the best that we can do with the short life that we have.
Your dad had come to the UK from Syria. Did your parents meet in England?
Yes, yeah, that's right.
And what happened when you were 16, Mustafa? Because I read that when your parents split up, you and your brother, your younger brother, were pretty much left to fend for themselves.
That's true, yeah. I don't know where you read that, but yeah, me and my younger brother did live on our own for a few years, yeah.
I think you mentioned this in a Guardian interview a couple of years ago when your book was coming out, but I'm really curious to know more about what it taught you and how you dealt with it at the time.
I think that when you're that age, you're just sort of precocious and overconfident and fearless, and I didn't really notice it at the time. You know, we were, we had everything that we needed, and it worked out pretty well.
And this is at a crucial time, the last couple of years of school, and you did do well in those last couple of years of school because you ended up getting to Oxford.
Yeah, I was very lucky because I had, great teachers and good mentors, and I went to a very good school. You could do exams to get in, so I studied really hard when I was 10 years old for the entrance exams, and it was essentially like going to a private school. I mean, it was basically everyone was like very studious and got great grades and stuff, and I was lucky enough to get into Oxford, and it was an amazing experience.
Have you thought about what your life would have been like in that period in your mid-teens had it not been for that school?
Yeah, I haven't thought much about that. It would have been pretty different.
And then you got to Oxford and you did actually something pretty close to what my son is doing there right now. He's doing theology, you did philosophy and theology. And then, tragically to my ears, as a parent, you dropped out.
Yeah. Well, I was very frustrated and eager to change the world and get stuff done, and so I actually dropped out, and I helped to start a telephone counselling service for young British Muslims called Muslim Youth Helpline, which I worked on for 2 or 3 years as a volunteer, and it was a secular